I'm sorry. Wow, that's hilarious. House Bill 682. Delegate Atterbury asked, oh, there she is. I apologize. I didn't see Chairwoman Atterbury. If you have a panel, please bring them up. I'm sorry, we have a senator in the wrong place at the wrong time. I think we have security right there.
The carpet is the wrong color.
Keep it going. Keep going. And you can start whenever you're ready, Madam Chair. Hold on. We gotta get a mic on, guys.
Hello? Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm used to seeing a little red light there. Sorry. Where? Oh,
It's
yeah.
under there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Delegate Vanessa Atterbury here to ask for your favorable report on House Bill 682. Great to see all of you up today. I can tell you're totally paying attention to me as you're all looking down. Great to see you. So, thank you. So, you guys, it's my understanding, are familiar with this bill already, requiring developers of certain energy stations to meet certain requirements. I just want to, before I turn it over to my panel, mention that to the extent practicable, the developers have to meet the requirements of the state minority MBE program, which I know we are not, the chair does not like using the MBE language anymore. So we can have that conversation. But that is the purpose of this bill, and I will turn it over to my panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I do feel the need to clarify. It's not that I don't like MBE programs.
I didn't say that.
I just want to make sure that whatever we do is constitutionally viable after the Harvard decision. And as they applied Harvard to the USDA 8A program, I want to make sure that whatever program we develop or whatever program we put into a bill is actually something that's going to withstand constitutional muster.
And is consistent with the ever-changing landscape of the MBE program. That is what I meant to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is William Kress. I'm here today on behalf of LIUNA, the Laborers Union of North America. In strong support of the bill, you have heard this bill before. Last year, the Senate bill crossed over and did not receive a vote. This bill is slightly different in that there are much stronger MBE requirements in the bill. This bill would really follow the framework of labor standards that is set for offshore wind and for community solar, which requires the prevailing wage, at least with respect to community solar. Offshore wind is PLA language. So we think this is appropriate. We think that this is going to help build Maryland families. We have seen in the past many contractors bringing in outside labor, temp labor, to work on these projects. This legislation will ensure that working families in Maryland have a reasonable wage. And you may wonder what a prevailing wage is for a laborer. I happened to look it up before I came over. In Anne Arundel County, that is $19.73. So it's not a significant wage, but we certainly don't want Maryland citizens making less than that or near minimum wage when they are working on projects that are funded through state payer dollars. This bill would really dovetail in with the federal tax credit, which is a 30% investment tax credit for renewable development. And so we think that the developers will naturally want to pay the prevailing wage to get that credit. And as you also know, the developers also get credits from the SREC market. So we think it's appropriate to set the labor standards in these generation cases. Thank you.
Bill, I have a question before we move further. So I want to make sure we understand. I understand. You're saying that these are state payer dollars, state, and how are you articulating that?
I thought I might get that question.
Yeah.
So there are really two forms. There are federal dollars flowing into these projects. And of course, there are Maryland taxpayers paying federal taxes. And on this the second portion of it, there are ratepayer dollars going into SRECs.
So, so that under that logic, I guess a McDonald's would also be state payer dollars because they're Marylanders paying for the burgers.
These are government monies. It's tax
Well,
money on the federal side.
No, I understand the federal side. In fact, I think most of our bills already require that if you're going to go after federal dollars or free state dollars, that you indeed, follow some labor standards that we've set. But what you're asking is for private utilities to basically that are not themselves state funded, even if the project doesn't have any federal or state dollars, that they still align or line themselves up with labor standards, correct?
So it's not utility projects. These are merchant generation. So
Correct.
these, right.
But these are private industry.
They are.
And again, to be clear, because that logic about the state payer dollars, we've already made it a law that if you're going to go after state money or federal money, I believe that you have to have project labor agreements. But this is for ones that even if they're not using a single state dollar. That's my understanding of your bill.
So there are no state dollars coming out of the general budget, if that's what you're asking me.
So again, so you're not asking if there's somebody building some generation or they're taking it, let's say a loan. If it's not a grant from the state, if they're not taking advantage of state or federal funding, are you saying this bill would not apply? Because it seems that this bill would apply even if they're using all private monies.
It would.
So again,
you're absolutely correct.
Right. So the goal really isn't about, because we already have, something in place for these individuals using state dollars. And as I always say, regardless of whether you agree or not, follow your treasure, find your heart. If the state itself believes in, unions and we believe in labor agreements, then we will, when we invest our money, we have a right to say how it's spent. But what you're saying is you're going one step further and saying, even if it's not state or federal dollars and they're using their own private money that they have acquired, that they still have to follow the standards that we're now asking.
You would be following what's done with community solar.
Understand that.
Which this policy was set 2 years ago.
No. I get tripped up on that all the time because you give an inch and then somebody wants the whole mile, because then then they go back and say, but what about this last bill you did? Because you try to do something unique or favorable. I just want to make sure that what we're asking for isn't just for projects that are using state or federal dollars. It's all projects, even if it's all an individual's money, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, committee members. My name is Rico Albuquerque. I'm here with IBW Local 24, the electrical workers in Baltimore, here in support of HB 682 for, I'm not going to belabor the point. I think everyone in this committee probably knows why we're for prevailing wage labor standards on energy generation. I do think the MBE requirements in the bill might be a little bit underrated, and I think folks should take a look at that as well. To make sure no one's left behind. And while we're protecting workers, we're also doing what we can to protect minority contractors. I do think the bill also aligns with the federal IRA policy. So when folks are creating new energy generation, they're going to be going after those IRA tax credits. And this just puts in the state statute what is already into the federal government in case if there were any changes with the federal government. We have that in state statute as well. So we're in support of the bill, and I'm asking for a favorable report. Thank you very much.
Enrico, I just want to, we had a great conversation. We hopefully got, better understanding who each other are. But I guess the 2 points I want to make with your statement is when I say the MBE requirements, my concern is there may not be MBE requirements by law. And we passed this bill and minority contractors just have no way of participating. And you and I talked about this because we don't know what that's going to look like, but we know there will still be minority businesses, small businesses. They may no longer have MBE set-asides or any kind of favor that can be pointed towards them. And those small businesses obviously have a harder time keeping up with the larger individuals. But secondly, to be clear, when you said about the federal IRA policies, well, but that's already set in stone. The individuals that want to go after these federal monies have to do this, correct?
Yes, that's my understanding.
Right. So this is only for so that's already a thing. So what you're asking is for the people that don't go after the monies, that don't go after state monies, that they also have to do this, even if they're using all their own money.
So my interest in the bill, sir, is not that specifically, but it's what happens in 2024, what happens in 2026, what happens at the federal government, and if those protections there are start to be carved out, I would like to have them enshrined in Maryland state law.
No, I get that. Remember, those protections come with some strings.
Mhm.
Meaning if those all go away, so does the money. So these people will now be on their own. You're setting a standard that may not be in place because the money may not be there. Like you said, if what you say, we all worry about that. Well, not all of us, but many of us worry about that. The problem is if that money's not there, but the demand and the standard still is, I feel like we're really shaking the ship up a little bit. I just want to make it clear, like I said, we've already got this in place for the individuals who are going to go for any of these monies. It's just those that don't. I believe this bill is specifically targeting businesses that will not use state or federal dollars because everybody else is already covered.
Could I respond? I'm just going to say for the developers passing up the 30% investment tax credit, that doesn't make sense. They're all going to use it. It pencils out.
And that's my point. So why would we need this bill if they're all going to use it anyway? It's just for so it can only, the way I've read the bill, it can only target businesses that aren't going to use this because everybody else is going to use this, as you say, because it makes sense.
They would be paying a federal prevailing wage. This would enshrine the state prevailing wage similar to community solar.
Correct.
And the other labor
You
standards.
keep doing that to me. I got you guys. You make me regret bad decisions. I don't think it's a bad decision then, but when I keep getting it thrown in my face when we try to throw a bone, it's painful because I see what you're saying. But as I said, to agree with you, it makes no sense for anybody to not go after that money. So this is only targeting individuals that will not go after those dollars because everybody else is already caught up.
Hi, Chair Wilson and Vice Chair Crosby. I'm Vicki Leonard, and I'm here today on behalf of the Baltimore DC Building Trades, which represents 28 construction trade unions across the DMV and more than 30,000 skilled craft professionals in the construction industry. I think we've had a really good discussion and feel like the only thing I could really add is that if we pass this bill, it also creates an incentive for the energy generation developers to go after those tax credits. So you could look at it as closing a loophole, right? So that if they don't go after the tax credits, they have to pay prevailing wage. So this creates an incentive for them in addition to the what Bill described.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And Rico, I'm gonna need you to start using your, let me know which one, because I was looking for your name on here. You can just say, just sign up as Rico, because I was so confused. You're good, you're good. But thank you guys very much. I'm gonna see if there are any questions around the room. Delegate Charkoudian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question, I'm looking at the bill and as it's written, a project is a covered project if it has a CPCN and it's constructed under 7-201. I actually didn't have time to go look at that. Does that mean, I'm just wondering how SREX fits into this, because I think that that's the piece that we haven't really talked about yet, that SREX are, if folks are receiving SREX, then they are receiving not state money, but money that the state is requiring to be paid. And I wonder if that's where there's this difference between wholly private money and money that the state is requiring ratepayers to pay into the system that is then going as a subsidy to this. So if 7207.1C is SREX, then it's already in here. If it's not, I wonder if maybe that addresses some of the concern, because that is different than just telling a project developer that with their own private money, they have to pay prevailing wage.
I certainly would agree it's a subsidy in the form of SREX. And
Is that, I guess I'm actually asking, I didn't have time to look up what 7207.1C.
And I don't have that at the
If
tip of my fingers either. So I'd have to look it up as well.
Okay. I'll look it up then. So if it's not, how would you feel about amending the bill so that it included just those who received SREX?
So I think we would support it. Obviously, deference to the sponsor of the bill.
Okay. I'll look it up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Lively discussion behind the scenes here. He's the chair of the utilities and easily enraged, so we're but I don't see any other questions. Thank you guys, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking the time because I know you have your own
Thank you.
committee. Bill, awesome as always, ducking and dodging. I appreciate it. Rico, young lady, thank you guys very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next, we have Christine Harbinson, Jason Williams.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Kristen Harbison. I am the political director for Maryland League of Conservation Voters here in support of HB 684 and 682, and we are grateful to the sponsor for her leadership in this issue. Maryland League of Conservation Voters is committed to centering our state's environmental policy in the principles of economic and environmental justice. And as we push our state forward to the clean energy economy, it's imperative that economy include good family sustaining jobs and pathways to those jobs through apprenticeships and training programs. In recent years, this committee, as has been noted, has included this labor agreement, these principles in other legislation, and we think that it's time for a more holistic approach. We are here in strong support of this legislation. Appreciate the committee's time and urge a favorable report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jason Williams. I'm the CEO of Mason-Dixon Companies. We are a community development firm based in Baltimore that does real estate and construction. Very excited also that we were just recently through the MBE process, registered as a solar developer. Mr. Chairman, you said something really important. There's too few people I realized in solar development and also in construction. For minority businesses, it's tough to break into new markets without partners. So I took on investors not only from LiUNA, but from different solar companies to actually start purchasing and growing my company, but also partnering to hire people from communities. This morning alone, I was dealing with an issue around hiring, and I reached out to some of the halls and said, "Hey, can someone help this homeless individual because that's an ex-offender because they need a job," and we were helping with housing and this issue as well as trying to create a new market of individuals that can, as we make these investments as a state and as private developers, that can make an impact in communities and create a new economy. So I'm personally excited about this bill because, I just bought a piece of property in Frederick. We are redeveloping several properties in downtown Baltimore, of which, we are going green. We are taking on investors to help us grow. We're designing programs to, increase MBE and DB participation across the board. So a bill like this makes sense for us as a minority developer, someone who's struggled to break into the field, who's had to partner with larger construction firms to do it. And now that my team has been trained and knows how to execute, we're looking for partners in this investment. And we partner with the state government all the time and federal government on those investments.
Thank you very much. Seeing no questions, thank you guys very much for your presentation. We have one unfavorable, Marcus Jackson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Marcus Jackson, Director of Government Affairs for ABC of Maryland. ABC opposes HB 62 as drafted, as it exempts a general contractor who has entered into a project labor agreement from paying workers the prevailing wage rate. The presence of a project labor agreement should not act as an exemption from this obligation. ABC vigorously opposes government mandated labor agreements on state and local government construction projects. Additionally, we oppose granting incentives to contractors who choose this business model. The rationale for exempting a contractor who has entered into a project labor agreement from prevailing wage requirements for covered projects is unclear and unnecessary unless the intention or intent of the contractor is to pay below the standard. ABC does not object to requiring a general contractor to commit to follow acceptable laws and abide by generally accepted industry standards as a precondition to being awarded a procurement contract. However, this standard needs to be applied to all bidders. We respectfully request the striking of lines 26 on page 2 through lines 12 on page 3, as well as lines 16 through 19 on page number 4 of the bill. Furthermore, violations which lead directly to disbarment are inappropriate and deny a contractor appropriate due process. Violations of laws should be handled in accordance with current laws and procedures. While ABC has no objections to certified payroll being submitted and expected by owners of the project and appropriate regulatory agencies, subjecting private payroll documents, we ask respectfully for you to rule this legislation unfavorable, but we are remaining available to work with the sponsor.
All right, seeing no questions, that concludes this bill hearing. Next, we will go to Delegate Guyton, House Bill 647. And Delegate Guyton, you can bring up your panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My panel is virtual.
Okay, all right.
And now for something a little bit different or completely different. Dear Mr. Chair, members of the Economic Matters Committee, for the record, I am Delegate Michelle Guyton from District 42B in Baltimore County. I do not come before you very often, but I'm respectfully here to request a favorable report on House Bill 647, which will establish regulations for pet insurance in Maryland. Now, I know you haven't heard a lot about pet insurance over the past couple of years because it is basically the Wild West of insurance in Maryland. And I'm certainly hopeful that the subcommittee chair in insurance, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, is not as easily enraged as we've just heard that your current chair, sometimes vice chair, can be. So, insurance in Maryland. Now, I know you haven't heard a lot. Y'all know how to scare somebody. The bill that I'm bringing forward today is actually modeled from the National Association of Insurance Commissioners pet insurance model. Yes, they do have one, and it provides transparency and clarity for consumers. So it's a very edgy bill, as was described by your chair earlier this week, and it falls perfectly into the theme of this committee this year, which is to protect consumers, but also in this case, pets. The framework that you're going to hear about creates clear definitions for terms that are commonly used when purchasing pet insurance. And the framework also establishes information about what must be disclosed prior to purchasing, ranging from policy exclusions, expected consumer contributions, to possible coverage reductions. So I've worked with my office has worked very, very hard on this bill. And so I want to shout out Caitlin Clem-Kellner, who's behind me, if she hasn't run out yet, who has really done yeoman's work on this bill after it initially began with a constituent service visit, basically to a pet ER in our district. And we recognized after talking to them and many other veterinarians in the area that this was a real problem for Marylanders. So thank you, Caitlin. So we have worked with the Maryland Insurance Administration to craft the language that fits Maryland's needs the best. It should also be noted that Maryland was one of the 14 states, along with DC, that actually was a part of the pet insurance working group, along with the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, the American Veterinary Association, and the American Property Casualty Insurance Associations. And that's where the bill before you really comes from, those groups. So this is where I turn into Delegate Guyton and become all touchy-feely. Maryland shelters continue to be over capacity, and high medical costs are a primary reason that families choose to or have to surrender their animals to shelters. So by moving forward HB 467, you'll open the door for more consumer transparency and confidence, which you all care about, and help Marylanders keep and protect their pets, which I also hope you all care about. So thank you very, very much. And I am going to turn it over to my virtual panel.
All right, let's see if we can do this without creating chaos. Carrie, we're gonna start with you, okay?
Sure, absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yep, I got you.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you, members of the committee and Delegate Guyton for introducing this legislation. My name is Carrie Lee. I'm not there virtually or there physically. I wish I was. But let me tell you why. This bill has been adopted by 7 states in the last legislative session. It's up for adoption in 11 more this session. And the reason why it's so popular is because it has all the consumer protections that are needed, and it sets a level playing field for the industry. So I'm here on behalf of the North American Pet Health Insurance Association, and we are in support of this bill, so favorable with some minor technical amendments that we have talked to the Maryland Department about, and that we'll work those out as the bill moves through the process, but they're very minor and technical. We hope this committee can support this, and we hope the Maryland legislature will pass it and it can be signed by the governor. It is good public policy. During the 2 years at the NEIC, we had the veterinarians on board, industry on board, but most importantly, the consumer representatives. I'm happy to answer any questions about it. And again, thank you so much for hearing it.
Thank you, ma'am. Next we'll go, sorry, sir, is it Renee? Okay, go ahead. You're on mute.
Right. Hello, Chairman, committee members. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Dr. Renee Varela. I'm a resident and veterinarian in Northeastern Baltimore County. Today, I speak as both a practicing veterinarian and president-elect for the Maryland Veterinary Medical Association. The MDVMA has submitted written testimony in favor of HB 0647, and I encourage each of you to review that document for the details of our favorable recommendation. Today, I'm testifying to bring home why such a bill is necessary in the first place. If you ever had the joy of welcoming a new pet into your home, then you know that excited flurry of activity in those first days. While there's an abundance of information available online, not all of it is as helpful as we'd want it to be. Time and again, the vast majority of clients state that they just want to do the right thing for their pets, but they're confused. As veterinarians, we gladly field so many of these questions and do our best to allay client concerns and hopefully educate them along the way. Pet insurance happens to be one of the most challenging issues to discuss in our limited time with clients. The truth is that we are experts in animal care and welfare, but not insurance. So we heartily welcome the intent of this bill and Delegate Guyton's hard work on this bill to require that these policy terms to be clearly stated up front by the insurance provider so that clients understand what is included to them and what to expect when visiting the veterinarian with their policy. This aligns with the AVMA, American Veterinary Medical Association's position on insurance policy transparency and the stated purpose of protecting and maintaining veterinary access for clients so that pets can be kept out of shelters due to medical expenses. Unfortunately, most clients are unaware that they get reimbursed by the insurance company after they pay for services at the veterinarian's office. Likewise, there is often ambiguity about policy limitations that are discovered after the plan is purchased. Finally, by passing HB 0647, you would help preserve the precious 15 to 30 minutes of time that the client has with the veterinarian for what matters most to the pet and their family. That's ultimately why people love visiting their veterinarian and why most of us became veterinarians in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, Adam.
Thank you very much. I'm Adam Alfano. I'm the hospital director at PetER in Hunt Valley. The average annual cost of owning a dog is about $1,400, and cat ownership costs about $1,150 annually. But that cost doesn't include unexpected vet bills for problems like ingesting foreign objects or cancer. 1 in 3 pets need emergency veterinary treatment every year, and a pet receives emergency care every 2.5 seconds in the United States. About 2/3 of U.S. households have a pet as of 2023. How many pet owners have insurance? About 4% of dog owners have insurance, and about 1% of cat owners have insurance. The average cost per visit to our facility is around $1,000. We operate one of the largest animal hospitals in the state of Maryland and are home to several specialty practices aside from RER. Our hospital sees over 1,000 patients each month, and most do not have insurance. While this bill doesn't directly affect the number of insured pets that come to our facility, it does lay the foundation for a future with more insured pets. Conforming to a nationally recognized standard as outlined in HB 647 will provide clear guidelines and communications for pet owners. Provisions that are important in both the human and pet world are pre-existing conditions. The model outlined in the bill limits how insurers can deny pet insurance claims related to pre-existing conditions of covered pets, and the onus is put on the insurer to provide those pre-existing condition limitations applying directly to the policy. The model codifies several consumer protections related to policy renewals, required disclosures of waiting periods, policy limits, conditions, and more. Robust disclosures allow consumers to affirmatively choose the policy that is best for them in a world with dozens of available options. I hope this bill is the start to a future with more pets insured in the state of Maryland. Having more insured pets allows our hospitals to practice best-in-class medicine and be innovative in pet medicine. Maryland already has an excellent reputation for innovation in human medicine, and it seems only natural that we would do the same for our pets. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I just want to welcome our colleagues from E&T who came over because this bill is jointly assigned. I know Delegate Guyton, she brought her friends with her because I guess ECM is so terrifying. But do we have any questions? I don't think I see any. Okay. Thank you so much, Delegate Guyton. I do not see any more witnesses. So next we will go to how. Yeah, okay, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead, Delegate Turner.
Just a quick little question. Delegate, how much is this? Because I would like to get my dog this insurance, this pet. How much is it very expensive?
I'm so sorry. I'm having trouble hearing her.
How much is pet insurance? I think is her general question.
Okay. I do not personally have pet insurance. Although we've done a lot of research on different policies. The reason that I don't have pet insurance is because I've heard from so many people that it's not as helpful in its current forms, which is why I brought this bill. I did have a $2,500 overnight ER stay for my puppy, which got me really interested. But I think Carrie can probably give you the best information about costs across the nation and in Maryland. I would suggest, though, maybe you don't want to buy it until we pass this bill.
Hey, Carrie, do you want to jump in here real quick?
Sure, absolutely. So the average cost for a cat is, this would be in the first year. So let's, the costs get higher as the pet gets older. In the first year is about $38 a month for a cat, and about average cost for a dog somewhere in the 55 range. But consumers do need to know that as your pet gets older, and the vets can tell you this, they age quickly, their costs go up. And so that's something that's very important in this bill. It makes sure that consumers are aware of that.
Okay, so it's really no different than insurance for a human. Okay.
True. They just age a little quicker than us.
Delegate Weibel.
Hey, Mr. Chairman. I know we sell pet insurance in the state now, and am I to understand there's just no regulation or statute governing that, or is this replacing something that's already in place?
It's not replacing much, but is there somebody on this call who prefer to answer to the specifics of that? Maybe Carrie again.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer it. So the current, there is current statutes around property and casualty insurance, and pets are considered property, but there isn't anything specific to pet insurance. So this legislation creates the framework, the regulatory framework for the DOI, the Maryland DOI, to enforce certain requirements on all the pet insurers.
And the fiscal note says that there's no really fiscal impact, that they'll.
Actually, can I correct that and say by magic, the fiscal note says that there might actually be an increase in revenues based on this bill? So I've just never seen that before, so I wanted to point it out.
And that's based on what, charging the insurer?
Filing fees, they say it's possible that we have a slight fiscal revenue increase.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no questions, that concludes this bill hearing. Thank you so much, Delegate Guyton. Next.
Thank you.
We will go to House Bill 101, still jointly assigned, Delegate Charcudian, State Highway Projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got one person on my panel. Join us. He has all these shares. Okay. Mr. Chair, colleagues from me.
Hold on one second.
Not my turn yet?
No, it is, but, is he not part of this? All right, okay, whatever, you guys do what you want. Okay, your turn, go ahead.
Okay. Try again, Mr. Chair, colleagues, and welcome colleagues from Environment and Transportation. For the record, Delegate Lori Charcudian requesting a favorable report on House Bill 101. So I want to just start by reminding everyone that we have a $3 billion deficit in our Transportation Trust Fund. I think everybody sitting around here is in a county that is having transportation projects that you are counting on cut. I think that's the case because every county in the state is affected by that, some more than others. And in general, we have a tight fiscal situation this year. What this bill, it turns out that while we have a $3 billion deficit in our Transportation Trust Fund, the State Highway Administration tells us that currently the State Highway Administration is negotiating over $15.6 million in ongoing requests for equitable adjustments and delay claims directly associated with utility relocations on major projects for multiple utility companies. So we have millions of dollars a year that we are spending of either state money or losing of federal money because the relationship and the structure and the negotiations between the State Highway Administration and the utilities who are responsible for relocating utilities does not give the State Highway Administration the ability to enforce agreements that are made with the utilities. So I think if any of you have ever called the State Highway Administration and said, you've probably had this experience, you call the State Highway Administration, you say, hey, there was that minor project down the street, you were going to put in the signalized crosswalk, and they say, yes, we were. And you say, what, didn't you tell me it was going to be done last August? And now it's January. And they say, yes, we're waiting on utility relocations. Probably everyone in this room has had that experience as well. So there is both the delays on projects that are promised and funded and supposed to move forward that are held up by utility relocations. And there's also significant funding. And what happens is when there's a utility relocation that does not happen on schedule, and the State Highway Administration therefore loses time and loses money, the federal government, and this is also in the in their letter of information, the federal government does these delays are not typically not reimbursable using federal funds because the Federal Highway Administration sees the delay as a state issue. The solution in other states, including North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, on which this bill was based, is to allow still the collaborative relationship between the State Highway Administration and the utility. And once the work plan is in place, a requirement of responsiveness from the utilities to complete the project, to one, get back to them to build the work plan, and two, complete the project on time. To me, it seems like a no-brainer when we have the fiscal situation we have, or when we have any situation. We want to be good stewards of our taxpayer dollars and our federal money that we get. I will say that I have had conversations with some of the utilities that you're going to hear from. They're currently opposed to the bill. I think that there's room for some. We started building amendments. I didn't quite get to finish that process before we came here for this hearing. I think there's some legitimacy to, 60 days makes a lot of sense for the vast majority of utilities to get back to them, or 120 days makes a lot of sense for the vast majority of utilities to put together a work plan. There are some utilities and some relocations that actually would require more than 120 days to put together a work plan. So The crux of the bill is to have timelines, to have clear expectations. And then when those timelines aren't followed, instead of the state picking up the tab, the utility that didn't follow the timeline picks up the tab. But the specifics of the bill, working on and still in negotiation with and open to feedback and amendments from some of the utilities you're probably going to hear from in a minute. And I'll turn to my panel and then I'll take questions.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Christy Daphnis. I currently serve on the Maryland Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, but today I'm here representing Montgomery County Families for Safe Streets. We fully support HB 101 to ensure that utility work doesn't delay state highway projects. When the state decides to install a new traffic control device, signal, or crosswalk, utilities often need to be changed or moved to complete the project. The process is complex, including that step Lorig mentioned, requiring the State Highway Administration to request that providers perform the utility work. However, there is no requirement that the utility provider move quickly. And this is bad for two reasons. First of all, we waste money. We have a huge deficit in the Transportation Trust Fund, and at a time when we're cutting projects, not only does this delay important economic development in our communities across the state, there are fully funded smaller scale projects that are languishing. I've personally requested the installation of several signals, sidewalks, and crosswalks in areas where vulnerable road users are at great risk. In my experience, in nearly every instance, it's taken over 5 years, sometimes longer, for a solution. One example on MD 97 at Georgia and Price, a complex web of water, electric, and WMATA utilities have complicated and delayed the installation of a signal at the heart of Wheaton's urban core. At this intersection, pedestrians must cross a state highway at an unprotected crosswalk in order to access important amenities. Second, safety. In 2023, there were over 590 traffic fatalities in the state. We can't wait longer to get these basic crash prevention and life-saving solutions in place. Just this week in Montgomery Hills, Khalid Scriven was killed while crossing the street. There were multiple factors for longstanding delays of the Montgomery Hills redesign, but utilities planning is certainly one factor. Many, many much simpler projects are needlessly delayed, and every day of delay in installing a crosswalk is a day of increased risk for cyclists and pedestrians and other vulnerable road users. Thank you.
Delegate Pippi.
Sure. Just to the bill sponsor delegate, you had mentioned something about the deficit or the structural deficit, and it sounds like you were making an argument based on some of the fiscal challenges we have. Looking at some of the letters of opposition, a lot of them come from counties, local counties, Baltimore County, Anne Arundel, municipalities. Can you speak to the concerns they have where, let's say, you want to make a bike path or something, and they have to move a $50 million utility project within a very short amount of time, and then who pays the cost of that burden?
So, sure. Thank you for the question. And I think that who should pay is the question. I think that if there's reasonable time, like right now, there is at this point in time, there is a cost allocation between the utilities and the State Highway Administration. And so if a project gets scheduled and everyone follows through on what they commit to doing, returns the phone calls, returns the projects, returns the paperwork, then that standard cost allocation is what is the allocation. So sometimes there's portions of it that are paid by the utility, either the municipal utility or the regulated utility. Other times it's paid for by the State Highway Administration. That part has to do with, and this law doesn't change that. That has to do with this question about who had the right of way first. So that's not changed. What this bill is doing is it's saying you have to get back to the State Highway Administration in a timely way. You have to put the plan together in a timely way, and then you have to follow through on the plan. And so the question in this bill is not who should have to pay, because in general, like who should have to pay when everyone's working on this the way that they should be working on it. The question in this bill is who should have to pay when the utilities delay in responsiveness, in work plans, in follow through on those work plans. That's what this bill is getting at. And what's happening now is in the context of whatever the rules already are about who should have to pay, which I'm not changing, when there's delay, it's my belief, and I think that we all should agree that those who are causing the delay ought to be charged for it as opposed to the State Highway Administration.
So this is my last piece. So one of the challenges, and I'll speak locally in my district, we've had multiple road projects and sidewalk projects through our municipalities, and there are so many hands in the cookie jar that the delays in many cases are not caused by, let's say in this case, the county or the local municipality. It may be caused by MDE rolling up on them and finding some issues that everyone was not aware about. And so I think the concern that these folks are saying is there generally in this line of work are delays. The timeline outlined here may be unrealistic. And because there are delays, I think the way this bill is written is that that person would be responsible for all those delays, costs related to the delays, not the original cost of the project.
So I think that there's a couple of things that I think you would want to keep in mind on that. I think the first is that I've discussed delays, and I've actually at times reached out to utilities myself for projects that are in my district. And there's times that the delays are in fact beyond folks' control. There's a stormwater issue that has to be addressed that people didn't think of. And there's other times, and I've spoken to SHA about that, where utilities simply don't get back to them, don't engage, aren't responsive, and they literally have no recourse in those situations. What I have asked of everyone who's about to be up here opposing this bill is for them to give me specific language. So I've had people say, can you just carve us out? Not really willing to do that, but I've asked for folks to give me specific language because I do think that that's reasonable. I've asked for specific language around like, what would it look like then to address these things that are about the unforeseen stormwater issues or whatever it might be, so that there still can be the accountability that I'm looking for and recognize these other issues that also legitimately come up.
Okay, thank you.
We'll go Delegate Rose, then Delegate Weibel. Delegate Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions as I'm reading through the fiscal note. So who decides, who is making the decision about the penalties and what will be the cost of the penalties? Is it SHA that's deciding?
Yeah, it would be the State Highway Administration. I'm not sure exactly where you're on the fiscal note, but the way that the intention is that then there's a possibility for mediation in there as well. I think the goal is to give the State Highway Administration the ability to have some teeth, because right now what happens is they reach out and a utility can either ignore them completely or engage and then not follow through on what they committed to do. And there's literally nothing the State Highway Administration can do when a utility doesn't follow through on what they committed to do. Now, I'm not saying that that's what all the utilities are doing all the time, but it does happen and there's no recourse at all. So what this does is in the context of the state's costs, right? So when we have delays, there's federal money that we're using or state money that we're using, and there is a quantifiable cost to those delays. And as I said, the State Highway Administration said that right now, they're in negotiation over, at this very moment, 15.6 million of those costs. So there's quantifiable costs, and those would be the costs that could be passed on, to utilities.
So it's on page 3, it says within 45 days after receipt of the notice, the owner or operator must pay the costs or damages specified in the notice or request mediation. So they have 45 days to respond. So who's determining the cost and damages, and can you give us an idea of what that cost will be?
Well, the State Highway Administration would be determining it. It's based on, it would be based on, it's not it's a very precise thing. When you're working on a contract, you have change orders. And so when you have change orders, you can point to the cost. So it's not an arbitrary cost. And it would be the State Highway Administration that would be identifying that cost based on the change orders and would be passing that cost along. And so I can't identify what it is in a generic way because it would be specific to the project.
So there's no percentage of what damages, beside the cost, the damages. When I see the word damages, it seems very open-ended.
I think the intention is for the cost to be passed along. So if there's a concern, if someone's raised a concern with you about the word damages and you want to tighten that up so it's specific to the actual loss that the state has lost, what the state has lost, what the state is paying, I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Okay, thank you. And then, so you, just to follow up on Delegate Pippi, as well. So some of the feedback and some of the letters that I've looked at as well, you know, there's some things can just sort of be, you know, it's a timeline that has a lot of factors. So, you know, not just like basically moving pipes and cables. What about delays in materials, weather, you know, lack of skilled workers? We had, you know, testimony yesterday on our unemployment rate is extremely low, you know, like 1.9%, I think was the most recent one that I saw. So my concern is, you know, things that are out of control, and then we're going to be assessing damages. And then ultimately, you know, how is that going to affect the ratepayer? Because, you know, it's going to affect all the utility customers to recoup these costs that we don't know what they are. And we already have people trying to struggle with their utility bills. So that's a big concern.
Yeah, those are all great questions. Let me start with the last one and move backwards. So part of what this bill does is it does not allow regulated utilities to pass the cost on to ratepayers. So there's a couple different areas, like when a regulated utility is fined, so like Pepco, Washington Gas, right, like regulated utilities that have captured ratepayers because they're monopolies. When they're fined, generally what one puts into law, or what one should put into law, is that they can't pass that. That comes out of sort of the profits above and beyond the ratepayers, what the ratepayers are paying. So specifically, that would any fine that they received under this bill would not be passed on to ratepayers of the utility. So 100% agree with you on that one. And they're protected in this. But just to back up, I think that.
Can I follow up just on that?
Yeah.
Because my concern would be, if you're taking it basically out of their profit, at some point they can come back to the PSC, and because we don't know what the damage is and what this cost is going to be, would they not then come back and ask for rate increases?
No, they can't. So there are very precise ways that the Public Service Commission has to make when there's things like fines or other things that are not allowed to be recovered from ratepayers. There are very specific ways that they have to identify the difference between, and you can't just come back and say, now we'd like some more rates, because the rates have to be tied to either an operating and maintenance cost specifically that they can show, or something that's been a capital that's been rate based. You can't just say like, we'd like more money. So that wouldn't be possible. Now, the other questions that you were asking, sorry, I'm trying to remember what they were, about the unforeseen issues. I think the question is, again, I would say that I have asked folks to give me some specific language that they feel like would take care of that. So I'm absolutely open to addressing that. I think the concern right now is that right now, all of the risk, even when the utility that has to be moved is the responsibility of a utility, all the risk and all the cost of anything is on the state highway. And so if there is a legitimate slowdown, that's understandable. And we recognize the cost is still going to be on the state. It's going to come out of the Transportation Trust Fund, but we can address that in the bill. But right now, we have utilities that aren't responsive, aren't following through, and there's zero accountability. They could literally just stop answering phone calls and there's zero accountability. State Highway Administration has so there's legitimate stuff that happens and we need to figure out how to balance that. But right now the State Highway Administration has nothing that they can do if a utility just does not respond to their request to follow through on moving whatever needs to be moved.
Would like to see if you have some documentation showing the non-responsiveness, just so we have some history of what the problem is.
Yeah. I think there's some reference to some of the challenges within the letter from SHA, but I think and we could follow through with them as well.
Thank you.
Delegate Weibel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, the fiscal note does say that the PSC advises utilities may seek to increase rates in response to the bill due to the prohibition against cost recovery related to delayed projects. So it sounds like although the bill may prohibit that for the project specifically, it doesn't prevent the utility from asking for an increase in rates in general.
It doesn't prevent them from asking it, but I trust that the Public Service Commission has the tools to identify what they're increasing based on what and hold them accountable to
Not
it.
necessarily. And then my other question is, it seems rather one-sided. So what if the delay is caused by SHA? If the utility's sitting there ready to roll and SHA says, oh, sorry, we're not ready, we're going to delay this project for 3 months. What happens in that instance? Does the fine then get imposed on SHA? Or is this strictly on going after the utilities?
So State Highway Administration delays cost the State Highway Administration money. So in that sense, the fine is imposed.
Well, it costs the taxpayers money.
Well, yes. Right. So in that sense, the fine is imposed on the State Highway Administration if there's a delay. There's not a cost to the utilities when the State Highway Administration
Really?
delays the
So
process.
there's a delay on state highway side, but there's never, or there's a cost of a delay on the utility, but there's never a cost to delay if it's caused by state highway. I find that hard to believe.
The cost is to the State Highway Administration. Yes, I mean, we're spending more federal money, we're spending more state money when there is a delay that is caused by the State Highway Administration. But they're like, we're already finding ourselves in that sense.
But there's also an added cost to utility if they've got all their assets sitting there waiting to go, and then state highway says, sorry, we're not ready. So I just think there's both sides to it, but you don't have to answer that. But
Okay, well, you know what I would say about that is I would welcome if the utilities, I've seen spreadsheets of utility costs to the state and delays to the state, but I haven't seen utilities provide spreadsheets with costs to them from the State Highway Administration, but I certainly would be open to understanding that better if that's a significant cost to the utilities.
does state highway track projects and delays and indicate who's responsible for those delays, whether it be them or the utility?
When I've asked them to construct some of that information they have, I mean, they have this information that's here, and then we also have the purple line. I mean, when the hang on, let me just find this. When the purple line, when there was a DLS analysis of the purple line project, I just want to see there was a DLS analysis of the cost overruns on the purple line, and I can get you that identified that 14.3 million utility relocation challenges added 14.3 million in addition to in additional costs to all the other delays related to purple line, which were significant above and beyond this. But what I'm saying is, like, yeah, there are ways to identify and track specific amounts of costs to projects that are tied to utility relocation issues.
And state highway.
What's that?
And state highway delays.
I don't know
what
if
I'm
they
asking.
track their own delays.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if they track their own delays and the cost to utilities. I'm not familiar with that as an issue.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I just want to give the other side of that, because State Highway does have their own issues, and sometimes it's supply, and therefore a project gets delayed for as much as 2 or more years, and it's a safety issue. And I have seen where they are not even providing the safety mechanisms to ensure that, in this case, it's not so much pedestrians, but it is vehicular traffic that is a problem. And so I guess I want to be a little cautious as we moving forward, particularly in this legislation, saying that, you know, utilities need to be penalized if we're not going to penalize State Highway for their delays as well. And I can tell you offline a particular issue that I am still dealing with. And it's been going on almost 2 years or more.
Yeah. So if you, I agree with you 100%. I spend like half of my time wrestling with the State Highway Administration, trying to get them to fix things in my district. So I'm not saying that the State Highway Administration is blameless. But where this bill came from is I have sat down with them numerous times and said, why isn't this fixed? Why isn't this fixed? Why isn't this fixed? And I've said, what is it that we need to change? And I've changed other laws. Usually they're in environment and transportation. So that's usually where I am with the laws that I have that are related to state highway administration. I passed a bill last year, continue to pass bills to hold state highway administration more accountable. But part of what I've tried to do with them is to say, I want to hold you accountable. I want you to fix things. There's unacceptable delays all across the state. And they've said, true, and we're working on this, and I've passed other laws. And they've said, and part of it is utilities. And I said that I want to fix that part too. So that's not going to be part of it as well. So I think that definitely agree that there's a lot that needs to change at the State Highway Administration. But I also, while holding them accountable, am trying to give them the tools to be able to move forward with things. And so if the idea of like, can we fine the State Highway Administration for when they screw up? Like, yeah, if we could find a way to do that, that's not just more money that's taken out of trust fund, I'm game because they screw up too. I'm just trying to, take this piece off the table so we can continue to hold them accountable for the other delays.
Oh, good world. Who pays for this if everything goes as planned? The move.
Well, some of it is state money in the Transportation Trust Fund, and some of it is federal money that comes into the Transportation Trust Fund.
So I guess I always try to follow the money. If there is a problem in this, okay, the people that actually set the rates for these utilities is the PSC. They do that. And I think we're fooling ourselves if we think that they won't recoup these dollars if we find them. That money will come from somewhere somehow because we do that for them. We find ourselves funding so much for these guys based on their rates, and this is our costs, our expenses. And we all know county can move things in the proper place. Why wouldn't this type of action go to the PSC? Because they are the money source. They are the people that actually approve the dollars and cents for these utilities. Why would we put state highway in that when we've listened to the delays that are there? And you see locally and even statewide, you can't get things done in a quick way with some of the departments. If you miss a meeting on a Friday, this Friday, you're another month out. These delays aren't always the cause of or cause from the utility. So why can't we just give something like this and let the PSC handle this?
I'm trying to understand. Is your suggestion, because maybe it's a good one, I just don't understand. Are you suggesting that the State Highway Administration would then go to the Public Service Commission and say XYZ utility didn't do?
I'm saying they go to the utility, PSC goes to utility and say, this needs to be done. We need to do this ASAP.
So how would they know? So SHA would
go there.
SHA would go to the Public
PSC.
Service Commission and say, this utility that you regulate is not moving. Is that what that would look?
Well, you're taking it down the road a little.
No, I'm trying to understand it.
If I need this done, if I'm state highway and I need it done, they go to the PSC goes to the utility and says, this needs to be done. We need to do this. And you need to start moving on this. And if they don't do it, let the PSC do that, because the PSC is ultimately the one that's allowing them to make or not make their money. Highway doesn't have much to do it other than to find somebody, which ultimately goes back to the ratepayers, whether we believe it or not.
So that's an interesting solution. I'll tell you what, I don't think it would work, but I'm willing to ask the Public Service Commission how they feel about that. And as we work on amendments to this bill, we can consider that one as well.
I don't think it would work the other way. I think there's too much ambiguity. You're going to enter a delayed group anyway, because highway does have problems. They run into it for whatever reason. But I'm going right to the money source. And I think that's probably a more appropriate way to actually control a situation.
Okay, well, we'll check with them and see what their thoughts are about it. Thank you.
Judging by the chair's reaction, I don't think that's going to be a solution.
Can you
but
see his face back there?
I
'Cause
can.
I can't
But
see
we'll go to
it from
Delegate
here.
Fisher.
I can't see it from here, but
Good afternoon, Delegate Sarkoudian. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you. So I did have a question. State highway, I know often, and I've heard this asked already, but just with my own experience as we speak, we had to do hydraulic testing on a site for state highway, and that's been 6 months now. I'm trying to get an answer from them as to some of the things that we need to do. And I'm also very sympathetic because they don't seem to be properly funded, I know, because
well, and we're wasting more money with this, but go ahead.
okay. So, and we've talked about the delays of state highway, but how about all of the moving parts that this legislature has put on the utilities in particular? And the moving parts are utility scale solar farms that are being built that require interconnection and constantly moving utility poles and upgrading utilities to them. In some cases, substations. The purple line, which many cases requires poles to be removed, conduits to be put underground instead. Obviously, road improvements, electrification of the economy. These are all mandates that we're putting on the utilities. And in addition to that, there's this massive technological change that's occurring in the wireless business, and much of the fiber and legacy copper, in some cases that's still being used. Comcast, for example, cable, coaxial cable, these things are actually on utility poles or along utility rights of way or in utility conduits, and they have to be constantly moved and coordinated with them. I mean, all this stuff, all of these moving parts are mandates that you're all putting on them, and now you're saying to them, you're not moving fast enough.
Yeah, I think that it's not unreasonable to ask for folks to follow through, to build work plans and to follow through on work plans. I mean, that is the crux of what is in this bill. It is respond in 60 days to say you got the notice, respond in 120 days with a work plan, follow through on the work plan you develop. It's not saying move all those poles in 24 hours, right? It's not even being prescriptive about how quickly the work plan has to be implemented, because the work plan, to your point, often is complicated and involves multiple different players at any given time.
But what if it involves the technology itself? So for example, there are still parts of the state that use copper, and the legacy copper from 100 years ago is still there, and it's still being used because there's no other option in some cases. And that legacy copper simply can't be moved because it would affect the entire line. I mean, do you understand that that's a real technical issue that they have to deal with Verizon on those issues, because Verizon is the incumbent telecommunications company? I mean, this is my area of expertise, so I'm just not exactly sure that you actually know what this bill is. You know, I know that you believe in the bill, but I'm not sure you actually know in the practical world what it's going to do.
Yeah, I do. And here's why, because what the bill doesn't actually mandate moving copper, it doesn't mandate timeframes for moving things, it doesn't actually mandate any physical thing to get done. It mandates work plans to get done, to be developed by people who have expertise, by engineers, and then it mandates that those work plans be followed through on. So
but we're saying the same thing. I mean, a work plan is a plan to move something because that something is in the way and has to be upgraded. So, and that something are all of the utilities, and there are a lot of them now. It's not just the power company. It's Verizon, it's AT&T, it's the legacy line, it's the new fiber, it's coaxial cable, it's Comcast, Xfinity. I mean, it's everybody.
I understand.
And all that runs on pole agreements
Mm-hmm.
or rights of way agreements with the utilities. It's highly complicated. It's
Yeah,
highly
so-
complicated. So you're imposing this mandate to me. I mean, obviously, I'm going to let you respond because it's only fair, but it seems like it's
that matters now to you?
I see I've triggered you again. But it's but in the real world, I mean, these things they're advancing so quickly, and these folks need the time to go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's really complicated things that are going on, both in the engineering of the transportation project and in the engineering of the movement of utilities. And so that's why the bill is not prescriptive to specific movement of any specific piece of equipment. It's prescriptive to responsiveness and then following through on work plans. And so it is the engineers who have a really good understanding of all of these pieces that would be negotiating those work plans.
Thank you.
And what the bill does is it says, after you negotiate those work plans with all your expertise, then you got to follow through on them.
Thank you.
All right, as always, a very entertaining exchange between you two. And seeing no further questions, that concludes this panel. We'll now go to the unfavorable, and Claes, Bill George, Dominique Butchko, and Brittany Jones. Start when ready.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dominic Butchko with the Maryland Association of Counties in respectful opposition to House Bill 101. Counties' concerns are frankly that our infrastructure is night and day different from private infrastructure. What it takes to move, a wastewater or stormwater system, what it takes to move a lot of we heard about walkways and everything else. The scope of these projects, the cost of these projects, the other government players, whether they're at the state and federal level or communities, are just entirely different apples and oranges in scope. And so if this were to go into effect, local jurisdictions just would not be able to comply with the 120 days to come up with a plan and 60 days to start work. I mean, the capital expenditure of some of these can range massively in scope, whether it's again, some small pipes or whether it's a massive part, depending on where the overlap is. So again, local jurisdictions are just an entirely different animal, an entirely different category, and we urge an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Bill George with the Maryland Municipal League, here in opposition to House Bill 101. My colleague from MACO touched on a lot of the cost concerns. I'm gonna touch on a couple things. Also in the bill, the 120 days notice says that is the maximum that SHA may set the date at. What there is no minimum. So I don't think that SHA would do this frequently or at all, but the bill reads that the letter could state that the work plan needs to be due in 3 days, because there's no lower end of that limit. There's just has to be by 120 days later. Municipal governments and county governments are a bit unique in that we operate in this world as both utility owners, but also as rights of way owners. And while this bill only touches on work going on in SHA right of way, it's really the local governments that cover the vast majority of the state with their rights of way. And so to see this bill come in and have it be aimed at municipal and county governments as utility owners and having to abide by these timelines and requirements without seeing any of the benefit of being rights of way owners that SHA is realizing. It'd be interesting to see, to have a discussion about whether this really should apply to all roads. Because I can tell you from our membership perspective, we have all sorts of delays in roadway projects on municipal roads because of utility lack of responsiveness. This isn't just an SHA problem. So there's kind of a lot going on in this bill, and I'm happy to continue the conversation, but as written, unfavorable, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Ann Clays here on behalf of PEPCO and Delmarva Power in opposition to House Bill 101. PEPCO and Delmarva Power certainly understand and appreciate the importance of getting projects done on time within budget. So this legislation places impractical timelines on owners and operators of utility facilities and does not fully consider the practical implications and unique circumstances that may arise from each individual project. The work is highly complex and requires multiple disciplines to collaborate in order to identify the best relocation path and then to execute the work with as minimal public disruptions as possible. So as discussed, there are situations in which a project may be delayed for reasons that are not the utility's fault. However, this bill would penalize the utility for those delays. So while we appreciate the bill sponsor's intent, PEPCO and Delmarva Power respectfully request an unfavorable report on this bill.
Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Brittany Jones. I'm the Director of Governmental Affairs for BGE. Also here in opposition of House Bill 101, I want to focus just on two main points of concern with the bill. The first, as you've heard, is the timeliness, the very prescriptive timeframe, and then the incredibly harsh financial penalties that come along with those. So the first part that I'd like to focus on is just the practicality, the realistic view of how these projects come to be. So the way it works is SHA will actually send us a 30% design. From that point, we look at our existing infrastructure and our facilities, and then we send them back, those that are in conflict with the route. So that actually gives SHA the opportunity to go back to rework their designs. So that way they can actually lower cost. So it's a very collaborative process. There's a lot of back and forth continuum. What we're concerned about with this type of timeline from the time they notify us, which would be that 30% design point, we'd have to then turn around an entire work plan in 120 days when SHA more than likely is going to alter those existing plans. The other point of concern is to start construction within 60 days from the time the work plan's been approved. I think you guys have already mentioned really great points. We're talking about relocating underground cables and pipelines, which we know is not a simple endeavor. And more times than not, it does require us to negotiate new easements, new right-of-way agreements. This is not a quick, easy turnaround. The other concerning part, obviously, is with the cost. If we can't meet this because of external dependencies completely out of our control, we have to bear the full cost of the project. So we do feel that the legislation as presented is extremely unreasonable, with heavy financial penalties that ultimately would limit the spirit of collaboration and engagement between all the utilities that are engaged. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. A few questions. First, it's rare that local government and utilities are on the same page. So kudos to you guys for coming together on this. First, I guess, yeah, to you too. The first question is about the bill and it being in other states. I'm curious if you've heard from industry partners for the utilities, for the municipalities and local government, from your partners in other states, about how this may be affecting them in the way that you're saying that it would affect Maryland. And if you haven't, that's fine. I'm curious if you've talked to anyone in other states about kind of their process.
I think so. As Delegate Charkoudian said, there are 3 other states that have similar legislation. So, we are certainly willing to reach out to them and honestly figure out how the heck they would be doing this, because for us, this, is very impractical, and we don't know how we would do this. So we're certainly going to reach out. I do know that in Delaware, they created a utilities coordination council, which actually seems to be very successful, where they bring together utilities, state, government agencies, and they meet quarterly to sort of go through different concerns that are going on and come up with some of the best practices. So that has been really beneficial, at least in Delaware, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, and if I can just add to Ann's point on that, we do have existing best practice structures with SHA. They're separated by district. So some of the districts we meet with on a quarterly basis to go over that prioritization work. It's just not consistent across state highway. We would love to do more collaboration on a regular basis, so that way we can avoid any unnecessary delays down the road.
Great. My second question really is for the utilities. I think you heard from the committee, there's a lot of concern about the delays in general and the effects on our constituents. I'm curious, from the utility standpoints, have you had any conversations with SHA? And more importantly, do you actually kind of have any insight to where these delays are actually coming from on the SHA side or on the utility side?
I guess I'll jump in first. That's a great question. We did, when we learned about the bill, we certainly reached out to SHA. We spoke with the administrator and we asked, give us these priority jobs. Where are our delays? So out of all the many jobs we do for SHA, we did receive a list of 8 jobs. We did the research. We found that one wasn't in our service area, and then the others had already been completed. When we did look and we did a deep dive analysis to say what went wrong, where can we learn from? And it does seem like, if anything, it's communication and coordination, and that can be easily resolved outside of legislation.
Okay.
And we reach out to SHA as well, because if there are problems, we want to fix them. So we received 3 projects. We went back and asked our team what was going on, and essentially the ball was in SHA's court. So we had that, and we were essentially waiting for them to respond.
Yeah. And my last question here, Mr. Chair, for the utilities again. SHA says in their letter here, $15.6 million in ongoing requests. You heard again from the committee that that number is big, especially given our budget deficit. I'm curious about, what do you suggest we do here, right? There clearly needs to be some tighter regulations, not just on your end, I think, but also within SHA, right? So I'm just curious about what you think we should be doing. You're coming here unopposed with this, and totally get it, right? But talk to me about what you think or view the future being in kind of solving our problems.
Sure. I'll take a stab at it. So we asked a lot of those probing questions as well. I'd be really curious to see that cost breakdown of how much is gas and electric utilities. From our conversations with SHA, what we were hearing is that there's the biggest opportunities where they see the complete non-responsiveness seems to be with the non-regulated service work, which would indicate, I think, as Delegate Fisher said, communications, fiber, those type of companies. So I can't make that draw conclusion. I'd be really curious to see the breakdown, but I know they've raised that as a glaring opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just to follow up on Delegate Boafo with and just particularly with the utilities. So obviously there is a problem. And so the delegate is trying to get at that because our constituents are saying that there is a problem. And what I hear and what I'm seeing is the finger pointing. Well, no, it's this one. No, it's that one. And no one, and you mentioned there's no communication, but that doesn't help our constituents. That doesn't help the calls that we get. So, I would be interested to know and to hear what your possible amendments could be to this, to try to rectify some of these issues. And so I guess that's an isn't it so question.
It is a great comment. Thank you, Delegate. I appreciate that. And it's complicated. I think we're really looking at the bill to see what type of amendments, if any, can be offered. When we were speaking directly with SHA, they've literally said, you're not the problem. So it's really hard for us to get to a point of amending when they're saying that they always have responsiveness from us. If there's project delays, it is sometimes just those complicated matters where SHA might be redoing their design along the way. So a lot of times they'll start with 30% designs, they'll get to 60%. And then by 90%, they could move a storm drain over 10 feet. That causes us to have to go back and rework our design. There's no way around it, but that's an unintended delay, but it's necessary because it might be saving SHA money. So it is really complex, but I truly appreciate where you're coming from.
But you can offer a suggestion.
We're looking at that very, very closely.
Thank you.
Thanks for your comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Reading through a series of the testimonies from all of you, it seems like at one point or another, you reached out to the delegate trying to work on ways to potentially amend the bill. But Mr. Butchko, did you reach out did you have a meeting with the delegate? Did you write this letter?
Yes.
You wrote the letter?
Yes.
Did you have a meeting with the delegate to talk about that and try to find ways to work with the delegate on this?
So we've communicated several times, I think primarily via text. I don't think we actually sat down over this one, but we have communicated on it.
Okay. The reason I'm singling you out is because in your letter, you use terms like worse yet, unrealistic, unworkable. It just doesn't sound to me from the letter that you submitted, that you wrote, that there is any collaborative approach here at all. And that I find very concerning, where the others on this panel have reached out and tried to find ways to work, at least attempted to, and have had meetings. It sounds to me like you had a couple of text messages with the delegate and did nothing else except write this letter that doesn't promote in any way an ability to work together and find any kind of common ground. Do you have any response to that? Is that a fair assessment of what actually transpired?
So I would say that's not a fair assessment. MACO always tries to find common ground. I mean, I was on 2 or 3 bills in E&T this year alone where we were officially opposed. We're able to come up with a deal. And then when I delivered my opposition testimony, it was more or less a support with amendment. So,
but in this particular case, I'm not talking about E&T. I'm talking about in this particular case, your letter uses comments that make it seem like there's no way to work on this bill at all. Like you have no interest in working on this bill. When you say things like unrealistic, unworkable, worse yet, it doesn't seem like there's any interest in MACO to try to work on this bill in any way whatsoever.
I can't
talk about E&T. I'm talking about this bill and this letter.
So to clarify that, MACO is always interested to be at the table and come to a solution for anything.
Okay, well, your letter does not suggest that in any way.
I believe that was a question. We're going to go on to Delegate Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think just to clarify to BG&E, so you mentioned that you had communicated with SHA about, I think, 8 projects.
Correct.
And 6 of them were handled in a timely manner.
There was, I can give you the exact breakdown. So of the 8, 1 was in Cecil County outside the service area. 6 were completed according to timeline. There was 1 where there was some back and forth. And what we learned is that was actually legal back and forth between SHA's legal and our legal, trying to agree on the contract terms of what was being put into writing.
Thank you. Yeah, that doesn't seem to be an egregious amount of an issue.
Out of, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You also mentioned, sorry for picking back here, that you met with SHA. Seemed like you guys had a productive conversation, but that they mentioned that you guys weren't the problem. Can you give us a little bit insight of who at least, and I know they're not here to kind of represent themselves, but who did they say the problem was in the meeting that you guys had?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult for me to answer that, but based on the conversation, we got the reassurance, you guys are always accessible. You know, if there is something, we work through it. Your guys are great to work with. In fact, one of our primary coordinators for utility relocation work came from SHA District 5. So there is so much synergy and partnership that we don't want to lose that type of collaboration through the bill being restricted with the timeframes. When going back and forth really does ignite that collaborative spirit and allows us to get to a better solution with that minimizes disruption to the public. I seem to pick up, it seemed like there was just concerns with non-regulated services, specifically just focusing on non-responsiveness, not being able to get in touch with other type of utilities that are non-regulated.
Great. Yeah, let's talk offline. I think members would be interested in knowing kind of more how that conversation went.
Yeah, and I'd love to invite them to the table too, so they can speak.
Thanks.
This is a quick for the gentleman on the end there. So if a county or a municipality is hit with a big fine or a big fee related to delays and things of that nature, kind of like what we're talking about, who bears the cost of that $10 million fee or $5 million fee if you're a county or a municipality?
So ultimately, the local taxpayer.
Okay, so my constituents.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I believe that concludes this hearing. No more questions for these witnesses. We'll be moving on to Delegate Healy. Oh, who's gonna do it? Pruski, you gonna do it? I believe Delegate Pruski is also a co-sponsor, so we'll have him sit with State Highway. There's David Zad or Bill Jorts. Hold on 1 second. Is there somebody from State Highway here? Or Department of Transportation? You want to wait? I don't want you to, without your panel, you want to wait?
It's fine.
Okay.
We'll keep going.
All right, appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Economic Matters Committee. I am here on House Bill 917, pinch hitting for Delegate Healy. This bill essentially related to an issue that happened in my district. I think I want to start with that so you understand, and it's a little bit narrower than the prior bill. We had a third-party state project that was delayed, and it's still delayed. And part of the issue was there were utilities that nobody knew where they were. So when you talk about the permit process, when you go through, certainly there's an issue. So the purpose of this bill, at least the intent, is requiring utility owners to submit to Department of Transportation authority information pertaining to the installation or relocation of certain facilities, that infrastructure. Again, the department wrote this bill. My intent is to address that narrow issue of the permit process, because if you're going through with a third-party project, such as the one that was in my district, and you don't know where the utilities are, of course, permits are going to be delayed. So essentially, this bill tries to solve that issue. Again, the Maryland Department of Transportation kind of came up with the language and other pieces, but it's simple, pretty clear. I did want to point out in the fiscal note, there is a cost listed. Again, it's minimal, but ultimately, as you know, we mentioned earlier, State Highway does have a lack of staff. So somebody is going to have to collect this information and move forward. But if you talk about a direct solution for trying to solve an issue, especially moving the permit process along, that solves that. And I have met with a lot of the stakeholders that were there. There was a concern in particular about the 60 days, which, you know, if there's an amendment or other things, but ultimately, I think this would help with the permitting process and ensuring that State Highway does know where those utilities are. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I ask for a favorable report.
Seeing no questions, and I guess that concludes your panel. Wait, is there
David?
Mr. Zaid?
Yes, apologies, we just made it to the hearing,
No
so,
worries. Go ahead, sir.
so thank you to the committee for hearing this. For the record, I'm David Zayden. As chief, I run the Office of Real Estate and Economic Development within the Secretary's Office of MDOT. My office's responsibility is to ensure that MDOT's real estate assets are utilized in a way to support efficient transportation and strong economic development in the state of Maryland. I want to thank Delegate Healy for sponsoring this important legislation. House Bill 917 will require utility owners to report the georeference location data of aerial, surface, and subsurface utility facilities installed within the boundaries of all MDOT rights-of-way and owned or controlled real property for all new and relocated facilities to MDOT. The requirement to report the data will be triggered if utility owners install, remove, or relocate utilities in MDOT right-of-way. It will not require utility owners to report on facilities in the field independently of their project work. Should House Bill 917 be adopted, my office, in coordination with SHA and MDOT's other modes, is prepared to develop a database of utility information and will establish a process by which data is shared internally to ensure coordination with modal project work. MDOT recognizes the benefits gained by sharing the transportation rights of way and other real property with electric, communication, gas, water, sewer, and other utilities. However, sharing the transportation right of way also means that required construction and maintenance work on MDOT's transportation system frequently conflict with these utilities. And this is the issue we're trying to solve. Discovering undocumented utilities in the field during construction can cause burdensome delays and costly change orders to important public infrastructure projects. According to a 2020 study completed by the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, collecting this data would save $384 million nationwide on projects and would reduce outage times and increase safety. I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to speak with you today. House Bill 917 is an important tool for the state to collect critical data needed to deliver critical infrastructure improvements. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Seeing no questions. Wait, apologize, didn't see you right there. Linda.
Thank you. I guess I'm a little surprised that State Highway would not know what was in their right of way because I know that for development projects in general, in a local area, there are all of these approvals and that have to go through. State Highway is one. Even during the planning phase, the infrastructure is laid out before they even get to a detailed site plan. And so then are you saying that, you know, whenever there is a development project that that touches State Highway property, they have no idea what's under what is in their right of way?
Well, I think, things have happened over time. Permit processes have changed over time. So there is a little bit of a discrepancy in terms of knowing exactly where things are, how big they may be, how deep they may be in terms of what's in the right of way. And so this effort is trying to catalog all of that and also provide a way that it can be coordinated into a database through GIS. So, and so as things over time, as things get installed, as things get reelected, SHA will have a better handle on where those things are located.
Yeah, and okay, I appreciate that. And I, as I said, I just find that disturbing because you can't even dig in your yard to put in a tree without calling Miss Utility to find out where the lines are. So it baffles me that State Highway doesn't know what's in their right of way.
Sure. Yeah, and I think the other piece of that is the Miss Utility process goes out there and flags things later on into processes. The important part of this is to know it at the beginning of projects so that design decisions can be made to work around those things.
I understand that. I'm just, I'm kind of shocked that that is not done when I know that I can only speak for my local jurisdiction because that's where I did my work, and I know that that information is handled before there's even a detailed site plan as to what is going to be located where. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no further questions, that concludes this bill hearing. We're moving on to House Bill 236.
Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Landon Farrig, Legislative Liaison for the Maryland Energy Administration. You have our written testimony as well as some other favorable testimony, I believe, so I will remain brief. This bill adds to the list of regulations that the PSC is required to adopt regarding the competitive electricity supply market and the associated consumer protections. The bill generally does four things. One, requires the Public Service Commission to establish licensing procedures for door-to-door marketing for the competitive choice marketplace. This will create a pathway for greater accountability for the bad actors. Prohibits variable price contracts exceeding 1 year and requires those variable price contracts to be returned to standard offer service or SOS at the end of the contract term, absent a new contract. This helps ensure that those who may be overpaying for electricity supply do not do so in perpetuity. 3, it requires that all contract offers prominently display SOS pricing. This is simply allowing customers to make an apples to apples comparison. And 4, it prohibits the use of commission-based pay for customer choice marketing employees or contractors. This will help to reduce or eliminate the incentive of door-to-door marketers to switch customer service without their knowledge, a practice known as slamming. We support the competitive energy market in Maryland. However, additional consumer protections will serve to limit the disparate impact of recorded unsavory marketing practices and the resulting disparity of negative economic impact. That is the intent of this legislation. Therefore, I ask the committee for a favorable report.
Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the favorable amendments. We have Frederick Hoover, Christina Ocha, and Benjamin Baker. Go ahead, sir.
Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Fred Hoover, the chair of the Maryland Public Service Commission. We're here in support of House Bill 236. We have filed written testimony with more extensive changes, but the general upshot is that we are prepared to examine the issues that are proposed in House Bill 236. It's our view that after 25 years, it's probably time to do an examination of the regulations and laws governing retail electric suppliers. I know you have another piece of legislation that is a little more prescriptive and somewhat more extensive than this bill, which we were also signed up in favor of. But the bottom line is we're willing to undertake the examination that is established by this bill to look at the policy changes suggested by this piece of legislation and make changes to try to facilitate a fairer process for procurement of electricity by residential customers. And with that, I will answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is about the comparison, and maybe I should ask the sponsor, because now that we're changing, a lot of the products that are coming out that are being offered, a customer may want to be able to say, hey, is the product I'm buying, 90% renewable or something like that. And the SOS may be some percentage. So I know they talked about being, looking at the standard offering, but the product being offered could be different. So have we looked at how we'll make those comparisons or how you'll be able to convey to customers that, it's apples to apples versus some apples and oranges?
Well, the Public Service Commission currently has a fairly extensive website that this details the offers that are made by the various companies related to price, electricity quality, and things like that. So that's the primary way. There's also a proposal under another bill that's being considered this session, which would change the ability for us to use some of the money that we get from fines against retail electric suppliers to actually direct that money into more direct education of customers. So some of the issues that you're talking about, we'd be able to facilitate more direct communications and education to customers on what they're looking at for that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you clarify for me what a variable price residential supply contract is for residential customers?
Well, essentially what that means is that you would be, when you buy electricity, the way a lot of these retail supply offers operate, they will say to you, well, we will sell you electricity for so many cents per kilowatt over a certain period of time, 6 months, a year, things like that. So they will guarantee you that you will pay no more than that. And then, but what usually happens in these contracts is at the end of that time period, you can be moved to what's known as a variable rate, which means you would then pay whatever it costs them to buy electricity. So just like the price of gasoline goes up and down based on a variety of factors, the price of electricity does the same thing. And so they would be able to charge you, 5 cents 1 month or 10 cents the next month, if in fact the price goes up. And with electricity, it tends to be very weather sensitive. So during the polar vortex, the price of electricity went to a large, high amount. That for the people that had variable contracts, that cost went right through to them.
Okay, so they're generally a fixed rate for a certain time period, but the only part that this bill prohibits is the variable component for being more than a year.
Which, the concern has been that customers have not either understood or have been deceived into signing these contracts that provide variable rates. And so the intent of this bill is to try to eliminate that process.
Okay, and these are customers on a residential rate structure.
Yeah, these are
business.
Residential. Now, there has been testimony that, commercial and industrial customers who have folks who actually pay attention to this stuff as their full-time job may not necessarily want some of the protections that are offered in this bill and in the companion bill that you're going to hear later on today. That's probably true. I mean, some businesses, have been able to do well on this. By and large, residential customers don't have that expertise, don't have that time to do the same analysis.
Okay, thank you.
Again, I see no further questions. I believe we have some unfavorables. Brief indulgence. Richard Reinhardt, Lisa Smith. Is Lisa here? I know I saw her. Here she is.
Chairman, would you like me to start? Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the ECM Committee. For the record, my name is Richard Reinhardt, representing the Retail Energy Supply Association. We have presented and submitted our written testimony, and we are opposed to House Bill 236. I'd like to take a moment, probably to echo some of the sentiments I will bring up in the following bill, talking a lot about consumer protection here. In fact, it's even titled in part of the bill for today. We firmly believe at RESA that consumer protection and industry accountability is paramount. Over the last several years, the Maryland General Assembly enacted important pieces of legislation, including House Bill 689, which was entitled the Public Utilities Electric Natural Gas Suppliers Information Bill. That launched the mdenergychoice.com landing page. This website allows customers and consumers to explore available supply rates and easily compare them to their utility standard offers of service rates. A few years later, we also supported Senate Bill 603, which is the Public Service Commission Electric Suppliers Training and Educational Program. That law requires the Public Service Commission to develop and provide a training and education program for individuals licensed by the Public Service Commission as an electric or a gas supplier. We've supported those bills, and we certainly support any ways that we can help to root out bad actors in our industry. We also recognize that the Public Service Commission has well-established authority, jurisdiction, and tools such as these pieces of legislation, and also in COMAR, to deter and punish suppliers that are in these deceptive practices. We encourage the Public Service Commission to continue those using of those tools and revoking those licenses. For those reasons, we like to adjourn and pass this along to my colleague here, and we oppose House Bill 236 as written. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Lisa Smith for the record, and it's nice to see you all for the first time this year, of course, in my new role. Today, I'm representing the Retail Energy Advancement League, or REAL. This association was founded by a coalition of companies that believes in smart regulation and consumer protections. You can take a look at our Consumer Bill of Rights on the website, and REAL has hosted multiple retail market forums engaging regulators in 10 states, including Maryland. This is REAL's first time testifying in your committee, and we look forward to working with you all and with the PSC and MEA on productive fixes to the market and for consumer protections. Rich has already talked about some of the actions that have been initiated as the PSC, such as the pending salesperson training program. And the PSC has already initiated a docket to institute consumer protections. Therefore, we believe the provisions in this bill that prohibit individual salesperson commissions, for example, or limit contract length and renewal terms would be better suited to be handled in that other docket where there's robust stakeholder participation and we can ensure changes that are directly linked to ensuring better outcomes for customers. We're here as the associations to hopefully chair, vice chair, streamline the hearing and not have everyone coming up, but we look forward to, we do request an unfavorable vote on House Bill 236 and look forward to engaging in dialogue around the other bill on this topic today. Thank you.
Good, okay. Well, thank you guys very much for your presentations. I believe that concludes this bill hearing. We're on to our, I believe, our last bill. Vice Chair Crosby, do you have a panel, correct? Can you please call your panel?
Tracy Hoggood, Rita Pineda, Jackie Benson, and Watt.
Knowing my vice chair, I'm sure this is going to be a calm and brief exercise. So we look forward to seeing the antics play out.
All right, you go this one, whatever one you want.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just short. Sorry.
And the moment we've all been waiting for. Yeah. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, colleagues. For the record, Delegate Brian Crosby here to present HB 267, Electricity and Gas Retail Supply Regulation and Consumer Protection. The cross file is SB 1. This bill is about consumer protection, plain and simple. And every year in Maryland, our ratepayers overpay on average about $150 million for their energy. I'm sure your office has heard about this bill, as I know we've taken 30+ meetings so far since the beginning of session. But what this bill does is set up guardrails for the retail energy supply segment of our energy market. It does not eliminate consumer choice, and I'll say that again. It does not eliminate consumer choice. Every day in most of our districts, people go door to door and engage in predatory practices to sign up hardworking Marylanders who are at the margins for energy programs that are overpriced and unfair. And you will hear testimony up here about those specific practices. These salespeople will offer incentives like teaser rates or gift cards and or the promise that someone is buying 100% clean, renewable energy. Some salespeople even engage in utility slamming, the fraudulent practice of using deception to procure a customer's account number with their regulated utility and then switching that customer's energy supplier without their knowledge or consent. And if you talk to your energy or utility companies, they will tell you about these instances. I want to break down how this bill will affect three groups of people. The first is the commercial customers. And I'm going to pause here to say that we are working with the Senate to separate out commercial customers. There may be a licensing component overall to operate in the state, and there may be some sort of adjustment in the bonding requirement. But the commercial space is largely going to remain untouched. They want predictability, and I think that we assume and should assume that the business community operates with a level of sophistication. And so we are currently working with our colleagues to make this part of the bill a little bit easier in that market due to those factors. The focus from the start has squarely been on protecting residential customers who are hardworking Marylanders trying to get by, mostly paycheck to paycheck. We can break down residential customers into two groups. First, those at the margins that are being preyed on. And then the second are environmentalists who want to buy or support development of clean, renewable energy, but who in many cases are being misled by exaggerating claims of environmental benefits, many of whom are also being taken for a ride financially. Today, you will hear from several of these customers who have straight up been fleeced. I've had 32 meetings since the start of session, and every one of them, we've kept tabs, has started with whoever's come in say, I'm a good actor. Imagine starting every meeting telling people that you're a good delegate. That is really weird and awkward. And frankly, it makes your ears perk up just a little bit more on what's about to come out of their mouth. In 2022, that's the most recent data we have. The 2023 data will probably be out in the next month or so. Standard offer service for the regulated utilities was roughly 8 cents. It was 8.0 cents per kilowatt hour. You don't need to know what a kilowatt hour is. Just know that's how you measure your electrons. And here are the self-reported numbers by third-party retail energy suppliers to the federal government. Again, this is self-reported. Zoom Energy, which is a subsidiary of NRG, 14.53 cents. Energy Plus Holdings, subsidiary, NRG, 14.68 cents. Stream, subsidiary of NRG, 15.38 cents. Green Mountain, subsidiary, NRG, 15.49 cents. Viridian, subsidiary, Vistra, 15.51. Clearview, 15.64. Discount Power, my favorite name, 17.48. Town Square, 17.63. Spring Energy, 18.46. Clean Choice, 18.93. Energy Well, 19.26. RPA Energy, 19.75. NG Power and Gas, 19.92. Palmco Power, Maryland, 23.89, and Sunsea, 24.84, which is 3x of SOS. Again, the average of SOS was 8.07. What's even more alarming is the trend that is widening from SOS. And here's a few examples. Reliant Energy. Reliant Energy Northeast LLC, owned by NRG, in 2020, they were about 44% above SOS. In 21, they were about 46% above SOS. In 22, they were 75% above SOS. Clean Choice Energy's numbers, 2020, they were 56% above SOS. 2021, they were 83% above SOS. And in 2022, they were a whopping 135% over SOS. In my area, I am part of the SMECO service territory. In 2018, we had 4,500 customers on third-party retail suppliers who overpaid SOS by about 2.2 million. In 23, they had fewer than 3,000 customers
with third-party retail suppliers who overpaid by $3.6 million. So the people who remain on it are paying significantly more. The next argument you will hear will be that they're delivering some clean premium product. The truth is they're delivering the same electricity we're already getting, which is between 6 to 7% renewable, masked as clean energy through what is called a renewable energy certificate or a REC. All you need to know about RECs is that when clean energy is generated, a REC is also created for 1 megawatt hour of electricity generated. And that, in theory, I'm not going to go too much in detail, but it's supposed to lead to more renewable energy development. The part about renewable energy in this bill is about two things. One, truth in advertising, and two, leveling the competitive playing field. Essentially, we want renewable energy credits to be generated here in Maryland or within our PJM grid or within the PJM grid system. Right now, Maryland ratepayers are subsidizing out-of-state ratepayers. I'll give you an example. There is a hydro plant in Washington, the state of Washington, that existed before RECs even came online. And what is happening is electric third-party suppliers are purchasing those RECs. They're delivering some sort of electricity that looks like any other blend that SOS does, and they're masking that as clean energy with the Washington hydroelectric REC. And essentially, they're upcharging you for the same exact product when you think you're buying something that you're really not getting. Additionally, kind of circumvents that market as we're not building any new energy off of those RECs here in our state. And the real effect to that is that Marylanders are subsidizing Washington state ratepayers. And that's not right by our people. Clearview, which is hydro, they claim that they're 100% hydro, is about 30 cents per kilowatt hour in doing this exact practice. So this is a big bill. It has several components, and we're gonna, obviously we've been working on this for I don't know how many months, and we've been working on it since the beginning of session, and there are going to be amendments, but I'll kind of walk you through it. On page 3, we defined an energy salesperson. On page 6, we require the electricity supplier license to expire every 3 years, and we require that they pay an annual renewal fee. What we are happening now is the PSC could remove somebody's license, but it is significantly harder to renew it than to just revoke it than just not renew when it comes back up due. On page 8, we allow complaints against the energy suppliers and individual salespeople to be brought by the Office of People's Counsel, the Attorney General, and any affected party. Also on page 8, we allow the PSC to deny, revoke, suspend, or refuse to renew new licenses of suppliers and individual salespeople. On page 9, we increase the maximum civil penalties against suppliers for each of the violations from $10,000 to $25,000. That actually puts it more in line with the rest of the code. And we will amend out the fines for individual salespeople. We've already made that discussion. Also on page 9, we specify that each customer affected is a violation. It will no longer be that one violation to harm 5,000 customers in the same way. Instead, it would be considered 5,000 violations. Also on page 9, we prevent companies from essentially disbanding and reforming under a different name in order to get around actions against their license. On page 15, we allow investor-owned utilities to, and we will add co-ops to market SOS and their energy offers to customers. We will add an amendment that will expand that provision, obviously, to utilities, all the utilities under the PSC, and prohibit them from recouping marketing costs from ratepayers. I know that I've had many discussions with members on the committee about that. On page 17, we specified that a third-party retail electricity supplier may not exceed the trailing 12 months average of SOS in the same service territory. Also on 17, we ban variable rates. We ban contracts for longer than 12 months, although we are working on an amendment because I do realize that there could be benefits to having something longer than 12 months. And we do not allow for contracts to auto-renew. On 17, we do not allow suppliers to pay for their salespeople on commission or other financial incentive-based numbers of customers they sign up. On 17, we do not allow suppliers to impose cancellation or early termination fees. On page 18, we do not allow suppliers to supply electricity to a customer on energy assistance. We do not allow suppliers to sell accounts receivable to a utility, which is also called purchase of receivables. Right now, the utilities are actually on the hook for the receivables of the third-party energy retail suppliers. So they sign them up for a horrible deal, and then the utility is on the hook. The third-party supplier signs the customer up for some outrageous rate, and then your utility is on the hook to collect that, which is absolutely insane to me that has ever been a concept. And if you look, when that came about, I believe it was in 2008, every year since, the problem has progressively gotten worse. We allow customers to put themselves on a do not transfer list to indicate that they don't want to switch from their incumbent utility to a third-party retail energy supplier. This is another critical protection for people who have been utility slammed and who are at risk for it. We require that the utilities submit monthly reports to the PSC about third-party retail energy suppliers working in their service territory. And we've worked with them from the start to make sure that they can report those numbers accurately. Pages 20 through 24, we require that certain restrictions and penalties for electric suppliers also apply to gas suppliers. We do this by repeating some of the language earlier in the bill that applies to electricity suppliers. Furthermore, we will require truth in advertising about green power claims. We will amend the bill to require that if a product is marketed as green, the majority of the energy will be matched with RECs that actually come from inside the PJM or that generate electricity which is delivered to the PJM. We will also amend the bill to require the third-party retail electricity suppliers report to the PSC details of any RECs they purchased that are outside of the PJM or associated with energy that will not be delivered into the PJM. And this will create more clarity about where Marylanders' ratepayer money is going. I know it's a large bill. I get it. And I do anticipate there to be questions. I also think that there's going to be a pretty lengthy dialogue amongst members, subcommittee, and across the street. But again, this bill will not end the third-party energy retail supply industry in Maryland. Customers will still be able to choose their own energy supplier if they do not want to stick with their incumbent utility. No Maryland family that is busy working to keep the lights on should have to worry about getting swindled by somebody promising them better rates and then straight up getting ripped off. We have spent over 3 years researching the unethical practices and bait and switch tactics that some of these energy suppliers have been using, and we're finally saying enough. And so we ask for a favorable report.
Delegate Kramer, Crosby,
I'm here.
Thank you very much for your economy of words, but I know this is a very hard bill. I know you put a lot into it. So thank you very much. Now we'll hear from your panel. Go ahead, sir.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Wilson, members of the committee, David Lapp, Office of People's Counsel. Appreciate the opportunity to speak here in support of HB 267, and we appreciate Delegate Crosby's, Vice Chair Crosby's bringing this legislation forward. Our office has been engaged in litigation with retail suppliers, probably going on about 10 years, and it really is a game of whack-a-mole. We go after one supplier, we succeed, and we have other suppliers pop up, and then sometimes we have the same old suppliers come back again. So we are in desperate need of the guardrails that this legislation would provide. Those guardrails, just to highlight a couple of them, they've been mentioned, but the enhanced licensing requirements, limitations on variable rates, disclosure requirements, ending the practice of utilities purchasing suppliers' accounts receivables, which means that the suppliers do not have a reason to evaluate the creditworthiness of their customers, increased penalties for violations, and green marketing provisions. These are all very important. We are working with the sponsor in both the House and the Senate on various amendments. And we have more detail in our written testimony. I wanted to just focus for my final comment on what we are not dealing with. We are not dealing with utility monopolies. This is not, a fight between the utility monopolies, those are, you have two different parts of your utility bill. You have the delivery cost and then you have the commodity cost. This is only about the commodity cost on your bill. It doesn't have to do with the utilities. The utilities are not competing for this business. So heard some opposition confusing those two. So I'd encourage you to keep that in mind. Thank you very much. We asked for a favorable report. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline Benson, and I was scammed by the company, the energy company, but I didn't sign up for it. I didn't give them my information. They got it somehow, and they used it. And one day I looked at my bill, it was so high. I went up to Gapco and I asked Miss Law about it, and she explained to me that it was a third party on my bill that I didn't sign up for. I didn't get nobody to come to my house. I didn't go and sign up. I didn't sign my name, but it was there. Someone signed me up from that company and used it, and they signed me up from 2020. So they ran it up, and I'm a senior citizen. And I'm just here to speak for some other people that will not get scammed by this company, and they don't even know they've been put on your bill, because I had no idea until I looked at it that it was a third party that I didn't even sign up for. So they signed me up, they forged my name and everything. So they ran it up, and I made a complaint. I put in a complaint against them, and I was suing them, and I won, because they knew they were wrong. So they had to send me a check. But I'm just saying, for other people that's older, that's not gonna pay their bill no mind, they shouldn't get ripped off, because they're on a fixed income, like saying senior citizen people. And they just go around and then getting people to your house. And that's not right. And I'm not a person that complains about stuff, but it was unfair for somebody to take my identity and sign me up for something I didn't even apply for, and ran it for a couple of years. And that's all I gotta say. They just need to be stopped, because it's really unfair.
Thank you for sharing your stories with us, ma'am. Thank you very much. Next, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Tracy Haygood, and I was at a giant supermarket around my way, and the lady was out there doing cell phones, and she was really deceiving, and I didn't know that at the time, but she said that I could get a cell phone, and she said, give her my account number. I thought that you had to give the account number, your BG&E account number, in order to get the cell phone. So I gave her my account, and she gave me the cell phone. And it was a distraction because I was steady walking. So once I got home and put my food away and stuff, I started thinking, I started examining the cell phone. And when I called the number, it had an energy company on there. And I'm like, why does this phone register to an energy company? So I called the company and I spoke to somebody, and I said, the lady said that I could get this phone, but she did it deceitfully because she was trying to change my BG&E bill over to their company. And the lady said, well, hold on. And she came back and she said, I'm gonna go ahead and cancel it out because the lady haven't got to the office yet with all the information. I'm gonna cancel it out and I'm gonna give you a confirmation number. And she did. Now I noticed in all different areas of Baltimore City where I live at, that they always send these people out knocking on doors and catch you while you're shopping, and at the bank, they be on the corner. But I notice when I go out White Marsh to the mall, there's nobody out there trying to give people cell phones and tablets and all that. It seems like they only do it in the lower poverty areas. And I think it's deceitful. I think it's unfair. I got stressed out. I was getting ready to have anxiety attacks, and all that was just uncalled for. I messed up when I gave her my BG&E account, but I thought that it was due for the cell phone, but it had nothing to do with the cell phone. And I think that they should not be allowed to deceive people into switching over to other people's electric company. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Rita Johnson Panetta. I was at CVS and they had someone standing on the corner, about 6 people, asking if you would sign up for the electricity company that they had, they'll give you a $20 gift certificate. So I signed up for it. And when I went home, my sister was always complaining about how high her electric bill was. So I called her immediately and told her about it. And she said, "Oh, no, you've been scammed." I said, "What?" And she said she had signed up for it in the past. That's why her bill was so high. She said initially they would give you one bill and eventually you would be getting two bills and you would actually be paying double what your electricity bill is really supposed to be. So immediately I called and tried to cancel it. They told me I couldn't cancel it. I said, "No, I want to cancel this bill. I'm going to call BGE back and tell them I want to get back on their plan," which I did. But the thing is, I had to argue with the woman on the phone because she told me I could not cancel the bill and I had to stay with their company. And I said, "No, I don't want to be with your company. I just signed up. And I'm counseling because my sister said it's some type of scam that you're ripping people off. You send a bill from BGE, you paying BGE and you paying them too. So you're actually getting a double bill instead of a lower bill." And the lady that had signed me up initially, she said that it would help the environment and the bill would be cheaper. That's why I signed up for it.
Thank you. I couldn't see your light blinking. Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Chair. I walked in a little bit late, but Office of People's Counsel to the far right there. So in the bill, it seems like we're talking about investor-owned electric companies are able to do or market, and I'm just trying to understand and help me because I've read this bill. This is one of the first bills we had this year. But what is your testimony as it relates to these companies and offering SOS and the services that these private companies are doing now?
Well, the current law is that SOS is not marketed by the utilities. They don't compete in that market. I'm not sure, you'd have to ask them. I'm not sure how interested they are in competing in that market because that's not how they earn their profits. The SOS is a regulated procurement by the Public Service Commission that occurs every 6 months. And it is essentially a pass-through with a slight administrative charge. It's a provision of the bill we're talking to the sponsors about. But you know, essentially, they don't have a tremendous incentive to market SOS. I think there are reasons why we might want to make it easier, or, you know, to the extent that they are not allowed to now share information about the cost of SOS relative to, you know, retail supply offers that are being provided.
Yeah, so the many times we've had a lot of people come in, both for and against on the bill, and it's being viewed as a consumer protection bill. So when I'm looking at page 15 that speaks to this issue, I'm trying to figure out from your perspective, if we're dealing with consumer protection, which is sort of in your, it's not sort of, it is definitely in your realm. What does that have to do with consumer protection? That's, you know, and I'm asking you after hearing what you said and just trying to clarify.
Yeah, I guess this would not be, you know, one of our big items in this bill. We're looking at this bill as a whole, and we think that the bill advances consumer protection quite significantly on, you know, a number of fronts. This would not be a provision that I would necessarily highlight, but overall the bill provides numerous protections, very important protections to customers.
All
And
right,
Delegate Adams, just real quick on that one, just because I know you walked in late. That part of the bill as written right now, I know that there have been, I guess, discussions amongst many members of the committee. The one thing that we have kind of worked out is to not allow them to recover for that marketing. So happy to have further conversations on it if that isn't suffice, and we'll try to work on something, or at least maybe not the entire bill, but if you're concerned about this specific provision, trying to work something out that's more amenable.
Yeah, I mean, well, to you, I mean, you and I have a great working relationship, and we talk, and we have talked about this bill, and if it's a consumer protection bill, I understand it. I worry that there are parts of this bill, like the one I just referenced here, that sort of exceed and go beyond that. But that's just my personal opinion, and I certainly need to listen to the rest of the hearing. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for bringing the bill. I just have some questions because this is a big bill and it's a lot to digest. Is it modeled after any states?
Certain provisions are modeled after other states, right? Like the price cap portion of it that trails to 12 months, has a 12-month trailing average of SOS. That is out of New York. There are other provisions that have been taken from various other states that have tried to do stuff. To be clear, I think when deregulation started to happen, I think it was 26 states that were ultimately deregulated. Now it's like down to 13. They've just straight up banned them, which is probably where I would have started, but we try to come in here and still allow for choice. So it's not like I just took a bill from Delaware. It's not like that at all.
Okay, and so some of these things about, I guess the mechanics of it, we know how to do, like understanding the Rex came from within PGM versus outside. Has that been done someplace else so we can model that? Or I just don't know how some of these things are implemented, so I'm questioning those kind of things.
Well, actually, most of that is modeled after SOS, and what we already hold are utilities too. The only difference is the fact that SOS or our utilities have to buy their SRECs from in Maryland. We just require that the SRECs come from PJM or an adjacent.
So it's a way the third party would know how we can track that.
Yes, and that is a provision that we worked with the PSC on so that they can know exactly where that energy is coming from.
Okay, and I guess some of the other questions around teaser rates and stuff like that, but is that coming from another model of a state and how they handle that at all, or?
No, I don't know if there is another model out there, but that was basically cell phones, teaser rates, slamming. That's where the conversation has been centered around for the past 24 months, and that's where that came out.
Now, there was one question that was at the Office of People Counsel. You mentioned something about checking the credit worthiness of customers. Like, does the SOS check, because utility is a necessary product. So do we check credit worthiness for standard offerings for?
Well, we have, the difference is that there's supposed to be a competitive market for the commodity side, which is just the kilowatt hours. On the distribution side, it's a regulated market. And utilities, of course, have ultimately the ability to terminate service for somebody that doesn't pay. But retail suppliers don't, for good reason, don't have that same capability. And so they are these retail suppliers, a number of them, not all of them, but a number of them are charging really egregiously high rates. And what they're doing is they're going often to low income communities and places, elderly people who are maybe more vulnerable to deceptive practices, getting them signed up without regard to whether they can actually afford the higher rates that they're being charged.
Understood. Okay, got that now. All right, and just a general question: do we have any third-party good actors in Maryland? Because the way we talked about it is like, does anybody do it right? Does anybody?
Yeah, I just think that the entire segment of the market is just completely in the Wild West, and there's no guardrails on it, and it is progressively getting worse amongst all of them. Bottom line.
All right, no more questions for this panel. Thank you very much. Cindy Carter. I'm sorry, Wyville.
Only applicable to residential rates or all rates? Because we have a lot of testimony from businesses that basically are saying it would end our ability to negotiate rates. And I don't think that's true based on what I heard.
As it came in, it does include commercial. They will be amended out. And so if I were AOBA, I wouldn't
give me an opportunity to reconsider my reconsidered position.
Okay,
So commercial will be out. They could go home and save themselves a night.
okay, thank you.
Wait, Steve Aaron's.
Thank you. Hey, Brian, sorry, didn't mean to get you there. I was reading through some of the testimony and it talks a little bit about we're getting rid of imposing a fee on cancellation. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is something else that we've had dialogue on. But a lot of times what would happen is the individual gets slammed or signed up unknowing, and then they go to cancel it and they get hit with another $150 just to cancel it and transfer it back onto what they already were. And they didn't even know they were getting signed up in the first place. I could tell you amongst the opposition, it probably doesn't even crack the top 50. But
There's a couple pieces that they're mentioning here that I think if you fix the rest of the problem, this will not be a problem, is what I'm trying to say.
yeah, it could, that is actually a fair point. If the bulk of this bill passes, that probably is something that we can reconsider.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
Am I good? My vision is horrible. So, well, thank you, Vice Chair. I will now call our second panel, Cindy Carter, Laura Peltier, Dave Arden, and David Saunders.
Good afternoon. I'm Cindy Carter, Executive Director and co-founder of the Critical Medical Needs Program. All companies that sell a life-supporting commodity like gas or electric need to have guardrails. They need to be regulated. For the last 19 years, I have worked with the most vulnerable population in Maryland. I now am going to let you know what I've seen over that period of time. These are my seniors. These are people that are dealing with all sorts of illnesses. 87-year-old lady calls me the other day, no idea why her bill has jumped up so high. Turns out she's on a third-party supplier. She never signed up anything. She's got to call them, and what is she going to say? So we had to go through that. I had another lady for 2 years. Her bill had run up to a point where her power was going off. She had no idea. She was living in her house in cold because she was afraid to turn on the heat. Turns out that when she was in the hospital, hooked up to tubes, allegedly she signed a contract, which of course she did not. So we work with her to keep her power on and work with her to get her off a third-party supplier. I have a gentleman that somebody came to the door, he talked to him and they made all these promises and he thought his rates were going to be lower. He went on to it because it was going to be cheaper. There again, it turned out not to be true. We need to stop this practice that has just been getting worse over the years. We need to protect my clients and all Marylanders, give them a free chance, a full chance to be able to be whole and to pay their bills. I had a lady that called me the other night, and you're going to love this. She said, BG&E called, and they said, I've got a really good rate for you. And she said, I knew I just talked to you, Miss Cindy, and never to take that. So she said, I knew BG&E wasn't talking to me about this. She said, you stay on the phone while I call the police. She said they hung. Please support this bill.
Hello, Chairman Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, and members of the Economic Matters Committee. I'm Laurel Peltier, Chair of the Maryland Energy Advocates Coalition, an AARP volunteer advocate, and I also co-wrote the 2018 ABLE Foundation report that really reported this dysfunctional market for the first time. I can't thank you enough for the chance to authentically discuss retail energy reform. This bill is so needed. In total, Maryland residential retail energy market hasn't worked, and it's cost families about $1.2 billion more than regulated rates, and that is Department of Energy data. This is tactical and practical, and by far the biggest change is the rate guardrails. The Electric Choice Act of 1999 untethered a $525 million yearly residential energy market with no rate oversight and utility purchase of receivables. And please know that both Illinois and New York did big retail reform. They failed to put any pricing oversight on, and their state's huge overpayments still continue today. I volunteer at GEDCO 2 hours a week, and I want to spotlight who's really harmed, and those are Section 8 families. Behind me are 2.3 million households, and at the head of the line are Brittany, Zalante, Latiqua, Stacy, Barry, Ashley, who had their power cut off because they didn't know they were being overcharged by a supplier. And I don't know if you know this, but in order to keep your Section 8 voucher, your power has to stay on. These guys live in ground zero for these retail energy sales folks, and $1,000 more will pretty much guarantee a housing crisis. So in real life, this is serious, and I urge you to favorably vote HB 267 out of committee. Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Saunders. I'm a resident of Baltimore City, and I'm going to talk about misleading green claims. After retiring, I studied at the Maryland Climate Leadership Academy. I earned a certificate as a climate change professional after taking 4 exams. Before purchasing green energy, I researched the PSC website, which proclaimed that all electricity suppliers, brokers, and marketers must have a license. I then went to the BGE electrical supplier website and chose Washington Gas and Electric, mainly because of their reputation. And they clearly indicated I was going to purchase 100% wind power. I gladly paid extra. I believe my monthly commodity payments went to a wind farm and that my carbon footprint decreased significantly. I believe that the Maryland legislature and the PSC assured that a renewable energy certificate was a legitimate way to track renewable energy. I calculated that my 8,300 kilowatt hours per year would no longer produce 3.6 metric tons of greenhouse gas. I bragged that for a few extra dollars, I was now avoiding 3.6 metric tons of greenhouse gas. When I did more research, I was shocked to learn that a 100% renewable energy certificate was in fact only a certificate. It was an electronic document. It was not energy. Going back to my contract, I read that a REC does not contain electricity. It was not even small print. It was in 12-point type. RECs do not contain electricity. Even I, a trained climate change professional, was misled. I've since come to learn that a 2012 Federal Trade Commission ruling meant to limit misleading green claims has actually resulted in unintended consequences. Please protect Marylanders and support this bill.
Good afternoon, Chair Wilson and members of the committee. My name is Dave Arndt, a Baltimore resident, a chemical engineer, a former product director of BP Solar, a retiree of NIH, and I co-lead the MLC Climate Justice Wing. In 2017, I got a Clean Choice mailer. It said for a few cents more, I could get wind and solar electricity for my home. I called them immediately. Their phone rep told me that my surcharge would bring more wind and solar farms online and put gas and coal power plants out of business. When I asked what happens when you sell out all the current wind and solar electricity that you have, they said that they build more to meet the demand. They threw in $100. I made the switch. I became Clean Choice's biggest advocate. I sold Clean Choice to my family, friends, and colleagues. Imagine my shock when I found out in 2021 that Clean Choice buys unbundled RECs and that type of electricity I was using really did not change. These unbundled RECs, which weren't reported anywhere and don't support any additional build out. Clean Choice's marketing claims are misleading at best. I promptly called everyone to explain that I was wrong. Even more horrifying, I learned that my friends were using Clean Choice's variable rate and paying hundreds of dollars more a year for the same electricity they would have gotten if they never made the switch. I called Clean Choice to cancel my service and discuss their deceptive marketing. They admitted, yes, they use unbundled RECs. They don't build out any wind and solar farms, and it's up to the consumer to know their rates. Then they stated, this is all legal. I'm angry. This is plainly wrong. Clean energy retailers are using deceptive marketing, price gouging their customers, and Maryland is just letting them get away with it. It's time that Maryland corrects this. Please support HB 267.
Guys, thank you very much for telling us your story. We appreciate sharing that with us. Again, thank you. I don't see any questions. We'll move on to the next panel. Fran Schneiderman, Tammy Bresnahan, Joseph DeCita, Seth Yeasel, and Mary Ellen Pease. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair Wilson and members of the committee. My name is Franz Schneiderman. I work with Consumer Auto Maryland to protect Maryland consumers and Maryland drivers. You know, we strongly support the bill because we think it takes the strong steps needed to finally make the Energy Choice Program actually work for Maryland consumers. You know, of course, the idea of choice is an attractive one, but you know, this kind of choice only really works to benefit consumers if people have good information about the costs of their choices and if they're protected against the kind of predatory practices that push them into bad choices that cost them a lot of money. And very much the opposite is the case here. And we've heard that at great length, and we know that it's cost Maryland consumers a tremendous amount of money. But I want to stress that it's not just Maryland, and it's not just a question of a few bad actors in our energy market. Other states that have retail choice programs have had similar kinds of experiences. The Wall Street Journal, which is no foe of market competition, cited a figure of $19.2 billion across the country that consumers have been overcharged in these retail choice programs. You know, and this is why a lot of states that used to have retail choice have moved away from it. But if we want to keep a retail choice program, what this bill does is offer the kind of regulations that make it work for people, that would enable people to choose alternative suppliers without fearing being ripped off, and enable people who choose green power to know they're actually going to get it. Now, I want to say that, you know, the legislature endorsed this kind of principle 3 years ago when it supported a bill that protected people in the energy assistance program, protected them against overcharges. This bill admirably extends the same kind of protection to all Marylanders. And to be clear, it doesn't prevent alternative suppliers from competing for market share. It just requires them to do it in a way that's cost competitive and respects consumer protection. So thank you, and hope you'll support the bill.
Sure, I will.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, it's my turn. Okay. Hi, my name is Mary Ellen Pease. I'm from Towson, Maryland. I'm testifying today because I'm in the same position many of these people are. I wanted to go green. And this deregulated alternative energy market is, I have found out, is nothing but a sham, a greenwashing type of sham. It's delivered to an unwitting population, and it's on a grand scale, and there's no transparency. But the worst part is that it's legal, which is what I don't understand. So because I'm terrified of the accelerated rate of climate change and what it's doing to our environment, a few years ago, I decided I'm going green. I wasn't going to pollute like I was. And I opted to change my electricity to clear choice. We thought we were helping the environment. So recently, I found out that I had fallen victim to this very thing, this greenwashing scam. Over the course of about 2 years, I was duped into paying an extra $10,000 above the BG&E SOS rate for something they call green wind energy. Then I learned I wasn't even purchasing wind energy. I was purchasing a REC, this renewable energy certificate we've heard about today. And that legally allows Clean Choice to claim I was getting the clean energy I wanted. But what upsets me most are the egregious practices that we hear about today, where salespeople go into lower income neighborhoods and they just prey upon these people. And these are not people, they give them these lower rates or teasers, but as soon as they look away, the rates go up. And it's just so unfair to the public, and it does not make any sense to me why this is not have better oversight and transparency.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Crosby and members of the Economic Matters Committee. My name is Tammy Bresnahan. I am the Senior Director of Advocacy for ARP Maryland. We have been here many times about third-party retailers, and I just indulge me for a minute. We do support House Bill 267. We brought a lot of our folks with us today to show you that they too support changes to this predatory practice. And just if you could, they're all in the second row back here. If they could just stand up for a second.
Go ahead.
We want to recognize them for being here all day. And we have educated them. Laurel has educated them. She told you that she is a volunteer with us, and she has taught them how to read their utility bill. A lot of us, before Laurel came into our lives, did not know how to read our utility bill. And this is something that she's done all over the state. We've done Powers in the Park with many of you. We've done a lot of outreach, and we are going to continue to do that. But we think, and AARP believes, that you need to adopt consumer protections, provide vigorous oversight to protect against unfair, deceptive, and abusive practices, including deceptive marketing, materials, and prohibit variable rate contracts. You have my written testimony. We thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, for putting in this very thoughtful piece of legislation. We know that you are getting bombarded by industry, and we hope that our pleas for you to change the way things work in Maryland are heard this time. Thank you. And we ask for a favorable report on House Bill 267.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Seth Yeazel, an electric regulatory attorney at the U.S. FERC. Any views expressed herein are my own and do not necessarily represent the views of the United States. Despite being a lawyer and expert in utility rate making, a retail energy supplier knocked on my door, forged my signature, and slammed me into a contract that about tripled my monthly bill. That day, I was working at home in Silver Spring when I suddenly heard an aggressive knock with a sales rep stating that Pepco is overcharging me and that I can save money by signing up with her company. She told me that she can show me where I'm being overcharged my bill. I'm an energy geek, so I thought, sure, I'll look at my bill with you. She spent about 5 seconds on that portion of my bill, scrolled down to my residential service number, and then punched it into her tablet without even mentioning it or asking for my consent. I knew that without my signature, she could not sign me up, so I figured I'd be fine. When she then tried to get me to sign a contract after I just told her I did not want to sign up for anything that day, she told me it was just to acknowledge that we had spoken that day. I said, that's not true. Signing wouldn't enter me into a contract. She demurred. I then asked, hey, by the way, why is the dollar per kilowatt hour on the contract left blank, since the price for energy is kind of the crux of the whole agreement? She lied and told me that is something that Pepco fills out later. It was amazing how quickly she had answers for everything, as if she was highly trained. Lo and behold, this rep illegally converted me to their third-party supplier. After several rounds of communication, I eventually got in contact with one of their operators, and it was odd how trained they seemed to be too, saying as little as possible, almost like she was talking to the police. Finally, I was able to cancel the service and receive a refund of approximately $40 for only several days of service. Since then, I filed a complaint to the PSC and was requested to appear as a witness for a probable cause hearing. This 2-day trial included the company's attorney cross-examining me and attempting and failing to attack my credibility. This supplier is currently appealing that PSC order, suspending their license and returning all of their thousands of customers to SOS. I share my story and experience with Retail Choice here to convey that if this can happen to an electric regulatory attorney, this can happen to any Marylander. HB 267 represents a meaningful step to stop this economic transfer from vulnerable citizens to economic predators. Thank you very much.
Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Chair. And to AARP, I guess I just have a simple question, and it kind of goes back to the one I asked for OPC, which is if it's a consumer protection bill, there's certainly other parts of it that relate to renewable energy. And just curious your thoughts on what it is we're trying to accomplish and where do you see the goals of this being? Is it purely consumer protection, or are you and your organization viewing this as something more? Because I think legislation goes to the more.
Well, like Vice Chair Crosby said, there are a lot of discussions about amendments, and we've heard some of those. But the crux of it is that older people are not used to what the industry likes to call shopping. And they don't go on the web. They don't go to the Choice website and look at those rates every single day. So we believe that, especially in the variable rate area. I mean, I too have had calls from our members saying that they had to call the company, that they were being charged a contract, trying to get out of the contract early. So we want older people to be protected. I mean, all Marylanders to be protected. And we want them to be able, when they call these companies, they're often, push 1, push 2, push 3. And it's not like going to BG&E, Pepco. They have somebody they can talk to. So we really believe that this bill puts parameters around the industry, around the people that they're calling, and making sure that they're treated fairly. So I believe it is a consumer protection bill.
Okay, I mean, so when I think about what the bill is and having read through it and certainly heard from many different sides on the story, I mean, there is a consumer who wants to support renewable energy, and I don't think it's being argumentative when I say that renewable energy is more expensive than traditional sources of energy. So the consumer making choices does come down to who's giving them the information for the purpose of making a choice. I'm not going to argue or get into a debate over the testimony that's being shared with us today, because that's not the same conversation that I'm asking you, which is at some point consumers. I'm a member of the committee that deals with energy. I'm on the subcommittee for public utilities, and I got to tell you, renewable energy is not the easiest thing for me to understand, and I'm one votes on these sort of things. So the question really does go down to consumer understanding and what is the best way to go about it, because I think some consumers do want to pay more for this idea of having an impact on the environment. Are you worried that the bill, if it passes, are they going to be given less information, less choice? I'm asking a series of questions, but it really does go to whether your members, on balance, have an appetite for that sort of information to make those kind of decisions.
From what I know, and when people are told, and maybe there is a good player out there, I don't know, but that they are told that they are buying renewable energy, as long as the company provides renewable energy, and if people want to spend more, that's on them. And if they can look at their bill every month, yes, that's on them. And if they choose to do that, it's their decision. And I don't think that this bill takes that opportunity away from them.
Okay. I mean, that's good testimony. The SOS has gone up. I mean, energy prices are what they are. It's market, and it's also just the nature of where we live in. So, I mean, part of this is not plus or minus. That I think everybody's rates are going up.
You're correct.
Okay.
Absolutely. SOS is going up every day, but it doesn't go up twice the amount in 2 or 3 months.
Thank you for your answers. Yeah.
All right, I think that concludes this panel. Man, Pippi, your light is the hardest to see because it's right up against the window. Yeah, it's just hard to see. It's all right. Okay, one more favorable, Karen Morgan.
Good afternoon, Vice Chairman Crosby, members of the Economic Matters Committee. For the record, my name is Karen Morgan. I am a member of the Executive Council for AARP Maryland. I'm here to testify in favor of House Bill 267. And let me just tell you, Mr. Vice Chairman, it's not easy being green. I really desperately would like to be green, but it's hard when you get conflicting information about utilities and how they manufacture their products and how they deliver those products to people. I'll never forget the day when a couple of young ladies showed up at my doorstep. I wasn't expecting them, but I was distracted with other things. And when I answered the door, they asked me if I would like to change from Pepco because, Pepco, they get all of their energy from coal, and coal is bad, right? I'm like, well, yeah, I guess coal is kind of bad. Okay. And they're like, you should sign up for our Clean Choice. And I'm an attorney. I used to work for the Department of Legislative Services. So I'd like to think that I know what I'm doing when people ask me questions like that. But I also want to be green. I also want to do something to support the environment. So I was on my way back to the computer to sign up for that program when it finally occurred to me that I need to stop and do some more research before I sign up for anything. One thing that these retail choice providers will never tell you is that when it comes to Pepco, BG&E, and the other utilities, they can't just willy-nilly raise your rates whenever they feel like it. There's something called notice and hearing and an opportunity to discuss what they want. We're not getting that with retail choice providers. They can just raise rates whenever they want. Whatever the market will bear is what they will do. So that's why I'm here testifying in favor of this bill. And thank you for a favorable report.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan, and I appreciate all you did for our state. I knew you were a fiscal note writer, right?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll now turn to favorable with amendments. We have Tom Dennison, Chair Hoover, Christina Ochoa, Benjamin Baker. And you can start when ready.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tom Dennison. I am Vice President of Government and Public Affairs for Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, here in favor of this bill, House Bill 267 with amendment. There's been some discussion today about marketing standard offer service and what that means. And I want to talk about that from SMECO's perspective, because we want to have a conversation with our members about the price to compare. Right now, we are allowed to do a price to compare that's posted on our website. However, we'd like to be able to have a conversation with folks and help educate them on the different prices that are out there. So just to put it into perspective, in 2023, the average residential rate for alternative suppliers in our service territory was 17.4 cents a kilowatt hour. Our standard offer service was 8.7 cents. We'd like to tell people that. We also have a product in our standard offer service that's called the Green Rider. That Green Rider is a renewable energy product. We have seen members, SMECO members sign up for green product alternatives who are paying upwards of double our SOS. So we'd like to be able to tell them, we have a Green Rider offer, and here's how we do it. We provide the renewable energy credits from the PJM that will allow you to go green and have this green alternative. Right now, state law does not allow us to do that. So this bill will help us to do that. I want to thank the vice chair, and I want to thank the reporting requirements that are in the bill. I think most of those are modeled after a lot of the reporting that we do at SMECO. And with that, I'll be happy to take any of your questions. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair Crosby, members of the committee, I'm Fred Hoover, Chair of the Maryland Public Service Commission. I want to thank the Vice Chair for this piece of legislation. We have been in communication with him with suggested amendments, but let me discuss a little bit about sort of what's been going on in this retail supply area. Since I've become chair of the Public Service Commission, I've encouraged the technical staff who reviews the applications for getting a license to sell electricity in Maryland and gas in Maryland to be very cognizant of companies that are already operating in other states. And in particular, whether or not they have complaints against them in other states. Because my view is, if you're a bad actor in some other state, you're likely to be a bad actor here. And so therefore, we should probably not let you in the door. We have underway, that was started by my predecessor, Chairman Stanek, what's known as maximum enforcement, where the staff of the Public Service Commission has taken enforcement actions against a number of retail suppliers for all of the ills that you've heard from the witnesses that came before me. The problem is, I mean, that process is basically complaint driven, and it has to be a certain number of complaints that generate an enforcement action by the Public Service Commission. What's needed are the suggestions that are in this bill to create
more rules and regulations as to how this industry operates. And in particular, the things that I think are important are these licensing requirements that have been discussed. You've been heard testimony from a number of customers about the door-to-door salespeople. The problem is, while there's information available on the commission's website and other places to check, if someone's standing at your door with an iPad, swiping through it, trying to convince you to sign up for their electricity, you don't have the ability to say, oh, stay here for a minute while I go check my computer to see if what you're telling me is true. So having licensing requirements for the individuals that are marketing that service, not everybody who works for the retail supplier, is probably a good idea. The second idea that's very important is a renewal of the existing licenses for the retail suppliers. Right now, once you're licensed in the state of Maryland, the license lasts forever. So what's needed is an ability for the commission to do a review of these companies on a 3 or 5 year basis to see what's happening and to make sure that they are adhering to the rules and regulations that are in place by both this legislature and enacted by the Public Service Commission. And you're going to hear testimony from some of the retail suppliers who claim that they actually are not part of the problem. I've actually had a lot of discussions since I've become chair with the retail supply companies and the industry, and some of them are good actors. But the problem is there are a number of companies that are licensed that either are out-of-state entities that, you know, prey on customers here, that we have difficulty trying to track down to even have enforcement actions against them, or who don't pay attention to the rules and regulations either established by the Maryland General Assembly or by the Public Service Commission, nor will they participate in this process. So we need a more stringent ability to oversee this industry. And the third issue that probably needs to be examined is this question of green energy. You know, it's going to be a growing opportunity for customers going forward, but we need to make sure that if a customer is buying green energy, they're actually buying green energy. So the provisions in this bill to provide guardrails and guidelines for that part of the business is necessary. And with that, I'll answer any questions you have. I have with me Ben Baker, who is the commission advisor who directly works with the retail supply industry.
All right, Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chairman, thanks for being here and good to see you. So your testimony, as I'm listening closely, is that, well, first off, that you're in conversations and working with retail energy companies. So you're engaged on, quote unquote, the issue. My question to you is, are you concerned that it's possible that we pass a bill that is going to knock those good market participants out of this market?
Actually, I don't think with the provisions of this bill, I don't think that will happen. I mean, I think this market is still viable enough, even though you may hear, you know, some comments, because I heard it across the street on the Senate version of this bill, that if this bill passes as written, they'll be gone. I actually don't think that'll happen. I mean, Maryland is still a very viable market, particularly, I think, when it comes to green energy. We have a lot of customers here that will be interested in doing that. And I think the bottom line is what should be available are companies who want to offer services and products that are either new and innovative or compete on price or compete on the quality of their electricity, but don't solicit customers through deceptive activities, don't solicit customers through false advertisements and things like that. I think the provisions of this bill will streamline the bad actor part, and I think the other companies will still be quite viable operators here.
So, I mean, the follow-up to that is you're the regulator, you're the commission, you are the chairman. And it's one thing to say as the chairman of the PSC that it's not going to knock the market completely out of a possibility for businesses to participate. This really does come down to what the good actors are saying and listening to what they have to say. And I would assume that your testimony is that you would promote and encourage listening to the market participants that are fair actors, because I believe that ultimately aren't the fair actors wanting this to be taken care of, so they don't have to continue coming back and have to answer questions to your commission and also to this committee?
Absolutely. And in fact, one of the things I've said to the retail supply industry, when I met with them, was you need to clean up your own shop. You know, the problem is this commodity has now gotten a bad reputation because of the activities of bad actors. And it's something that I dealt with in another position where there was an industry that was just coming online, but there were people that are trying to get into it who weren't, you know, viable entities. And what I said to the industry was, look, you need to take care of this and clean out these bad actors, because one or two things are going to happen. Either one, it's going to kill your product, which is still relatively new, or two, you're going to wind up with a whole lot of rules and regulations that you don't want to have to live with. I've said the same thing to the retail supply industry. I think it's incumbent on them to try and drive out the bad actors. And if they can't do that, then the other options are change the law or make new regulations.
I'm not sure. I mean, look, a market participant in a setting like that, their job is to compete, not necessarily. I mean, if you want to knock somebody out, you knock them out of business. You don't knock them out because you're trying to clean up the bad actors. A second question, if you don't mind. So you receive complaints, right? So I mean, you are a complaint-driven organization in this front. Are you suggesting that there are too many complaints, or are you saying that you don't have enough tools at your disposal? So
no, I think
if you're engaged on it and that's your testimony, then it can't be that you're not able to adjudicate. It may be because you don't have enough tools to handle the complaints, or are you not able to deal with the bad actors? Because my feeling is, if you don't mind, that you probably know who the bad actors are. I mean, so are you saying you don't have enough tools to go after the ones that are receiving the multiple complaints? Is that
well, I think this bill does give us more tools in the toolbox to do that part. But part of the problem with the current process is it requires a certain number of complaints for us to sort of justify taking an enforcement action against the company. And that process takes a long time. And so the customers who have been injured by this, have been defrauded by these people who are out the money, you know, are waiting an inordinate period of time before they get any restitution, even if the process that's currently in place works the way it's supposed to. And so my testimony today is that there are new guidelines and new tools in this proposed legislation that'll help eliminate the need to have to use this enforcement process. I mean, my predecessor was one of the biggest fans of retail competition for energy services. He spoke about it all the time, but he's the individual who created maximum enforcement against these retail suppliers, because even he became convinced that there were basic problems in the way this business operates.
Thank you for your testimony. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, before we go to Delegate Harrison, I just want to let you know, Commissioner Barve walked in, saw you answering questions and ran. So just let you. Delegate Harrison.
Thank you. And this is a question that I probably should have asked earlier, but since you're here, I'll ask you. Do these retailers advertise online to individuals? So one of the problems that we know occurs is, I guess it may be called mirroring. You know, there's some sort of advertisement and an individual may you know, click on it or decide that they want to order whatever. And then some other entity finds their account or gets their information and then scams. So could this be this retail, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, what'd you call it, scamming?
Slamming.
Slamming.
Slamming, yeah.
Slamming. Does this happen? Does this slamming happen online?
I've not heard that particular scenario as one of the things, but obviously these companies, you know, they send solicitations through the mail. They, you know, do solicit with online solicitations. They also call people on the phone, as you've heard from, and in fact, I've gotten those calls myself from various entities. And then the final one, which I think is the one that has caused the most concern, are the companies that hire actually third-party entities who then hire high school graduates to go door to door in certain neighborhoods to try to sell electricity. So there are various means that they go about it. And then some of them actually set up stands at retail shopping centers and things like that to attract people to come do it. So there's a variety of means that they do it this way.
Yeah, thank you for that. And the reason that I asked is because I know that we were talking specifically about seniors today, but you know, you have some individuals that are disabled, maybe highly functional, but can be easily confused, and they also can be targeted by these individuals because they may be living on their own, and you know, like as I said, highly functional, but still have cognitive issues.
Sure.
I would say.
Yeah, and that is right, and I think it's one of the reasons why you know it's important that standard offer service remain as one of the viable avenues, because I mean there are some people who are going to want the opportunity to buy electricity for whatever reason. They think they can get a better price. They may get these new services, or they may want to buy what they consider to be environmentally better electricity. But there's quite frankly a whole lot of customers who just can't be bothered with this. And for them, standard offer service is perfectly fine for them. And that should probably remain available for the ones who want to do that. I mean, at the time of the divestiture of the phone company, when the things that you could buy were either the phone instrument itself or long distance service, they actually divided up all the customers in the country between the three existing long distance companies, AT&T, MCI, and Sprint. But you had the ability to move from that if you wanted to. Well, some people did, but a large number never did. They just stuck with whoever they got assigned to.
And I know this problem didn't just happen yesterday. This problem's been coming a long time, and I question the reaction to the problem. We are now coming out with a whole lot of legislation that is really, to the delegate's point, destroying other businesses because of some bad actors. And I would have thought that I tried to give you some extra work earlier in another bill. I don't know if you remember that, but it was trying to help you on that to give you something to do extra. But I guess I question this overall bill because of the overreaction. I think this is an overreaction to a problem that should have been addressed before. And I don't know whether it's under your purview to do that, or if you have the tools or had the tools to do that. And I really am concerned for some of these other people. I mean, there are businesses out here that we tout every day, clean energy, and these are the people that are helping us with that. And now we're going to go out and hammer them. And some of them are good people and some of them are good businesses. Can you help me with that?
Sure. Well, one thing, I mean, I've only actually been on the job since July 1. So what happened?
I didn't mean you personally.
No, I understand. And I think, but I think part of the problem is this, and this is not reflective of just the Maryland Public Service Commission, but I think public service commissions across the country that are operating in these situations with retail suppliers, they're very used to dealing with public utilities. And when a commission tells a public utility to do something or not do something, they by and large follow that because we have the ultimate hook. We control their access to money. And when you're dealing with private enterprise companies, some will try to beat the other guy based on, as I said, innovation, price, and whatever. But there are other entities that will go right to the edge of the line to go as far as they can, and some will go right beyond it. And I think it actually took a while for commissions to comprehend the fact that there were people that wouldn't pay attention to their rules and regulations. And as I said, my predecessor was one of the biggest advocates for retail competition, but even he became convinced at the end that there was enough of a problem with this industry that he had to create this, what he referred to as maximum enforcement, and take on these enforcement actions against these companies. What I'm saying today is that can be part of the process, but I actually think that after 25 years, maybe it's time to take a hard look at the rules and regulations and practices of this business and see if we need to make some changes. I'm not saying that you need to adopt everything that's in this bill, but I think there's a whole lot of things in here that will improve the process.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I want to recognize former chair of ENC and now Commissioner Barve. He came back. I will note he didn't help Chair Hoover out one iota up here. Just left them hanging. Chair, and this actually might be more for you, Ben. Just a question about Rex and the provisions in the bill. And I know I don't want to get too down the rabbit hole, but essentially limiting the Rex to the PJM or adjacent, how the utilities do it. In theory, that should drive up the price of the REC and then ultimately lead to more clean energy generation here on our grid, correct?
That would be the theory.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's usually what happens when you do this, because rec prices are a fungible thing and the industry reacts to the rec price, quite honestly.
Okay. Additionally, I think we're probably about to hear a whole host of the unfavorables, but when they come up here and testify, none of them, most of them, aren't even in the generation business. Nothing prevents any of the clean energy or any generation for that matter to bid in or auction into the competitive market of SOS, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last is, do you know how many actors, and I maybe you have an updated number, so I don't want to just start throwing out, but how many third-party retail suppliers are in the state?
I actually don't know off the top of my head. I mean,
the last number I have is 59.
Oh, it's much higher than that. It's,
Okay.
this includes brokers, and so that's where I would need to get, I think we're around 600 brokers and suppliers are registered with us. Some of that might be, they have a gas license and an electric license, so it's probably lower, and we can get you the exact number.
Okay, that would be super helpful.
Yeah.
All right. Seeing no further questions, that concludes this panel. And now we will turn to the unfavorables. Rich Reinhardt. Don't worry, Rich, I won't let you come up here by yourself. Lisa Smith, Ryan Anlou, Travis Kavula, and Jennifer Spinozzi. Go ahead when ready.
Thank you very much again, Mr. Vice Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, again, it's Richard Reinhardt for representing the Retail Energy Supply Association. We are here to oppose House Bill 267. I submitted written testimony on behalf of RESA. I would like to take my time just to answer some of the, or respond, I should say, some of the questions that came from the committee a few moments ago, where we were hearing about additional guardrails and cleaning up our own shop. First and foremost, there are guardrails in place. As I said in my earlier testimony, Public Service Commission currently has well-established authority and jurisdiction and tools to revoke licenses or assess fines for those bad actors. More importantly, I echoed a moment ago about how we came to the table supporting legislation that passed nearly 4 years ago called the Public Service Commission Electric, Gas, and Supplier Training Education Program. For the last 4 years, that program has yet to be implemented by the Public Service Commission. We're also talking about a moment ago, the chairman, about the maximum enforcement initiative. If you look at the numbers that came out of the Public Service Commission's report back in November this past year, it states that enforcement actions tend to be effective, bringing suppliers into compliance with the goals of deterring repeated violations. In that report, from January of last year to August of 2023, 61% decrease in complaints. Nearly 82% decrease in complaints among 3 suppliers that incurred the most complaints. Clearly, that information in that report and some of the legislation that we've supported substantiates that enforcement, non-compliant remediation, and educational outreach, which are part of the Public Service Commission's recommendations in that report, are the effective tools that we need to provide additional safeguards. We support those recommendations in that report, and we'd like to see those recommendations be part of this discussion. For that reason, we'd like to say that we oppose this bill.
Lisa Smith, again, on behalf of Retail Energy Advancement League, or REAL. We are here asking for an unfavorable vote on House Bill 267 as drafted. However, REAL does agree on ensuring that no one is deceived, slammed, or otherwise a victim of fraud or deception, which are the purpose of the consumer protection regs that are on the books, regulations, and REAL will be happy again to come work with the committee, the vice chair, to the sponsor to to work on this bill. We just feel that currently many provisions in the bill are focusing on other things. The rec piece has been discussed and allowing monopoly utilities to market products with an unfair market advantage. A big piece that we're concerned with is the price regulation. No other product in a competitive market has a limit on price. That's the 12-month trailing average that was discussed, as well as bars on auto renewals and the length of contract. The farthest that this legislature has gone with into that area so far was legislation in a prior year to limit the use of energy assistance funds, to say that those customers could not pay more than SOS, and that passed and those regulations were implemented. Currently, to our knowledge, no one can market to OHEP customers because no supplier has applied to do so. So that issue that's the bill is attempting to address has already been dealt with. Rather than these provisions, again, the dealing with some of these issues, such as the purchase of receivable, does make more sense in the currently open PSC docket. It's a very complicated issue. It's being handled there, and regulations will be needed there anyway. And again, our members are involved in that process. And finally, we've discussed the individual salesperson licensing and training. We support the salesperson training program that's pending at the commission. And I'll stop there in the interest of time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Brian Anley with the Apartment and Office Building Association of Metropolitan Washington. Apologies. Thank you. No. And I was going to say, delighted to hear that there are some amendments coming that will exempt out commercial contracts. We do still have a few concerns about the impact that this will have on the retail energy supply market generally. But if I could just make one brief ask, is that any amendments include an exemption for licensing of commercial contract buyers. We do have a subsidiary, the IOBA Alliance. With me today is Kevin Carey from the IOBA Alliance that procures contracts on behalf of our members. And so we ask that any licensing not apply to those commercial types of entities as well. Thank you.
Do you sell it, or do you sell it? Does that subsidiary sell the energy to anybody else?
No, just to our members.
All right, get with my office.
Let's see if I can borrow this. I'll get comfortable with you. Can have that. I'm Travis Kavula, Vice President of Regulatory Affairs for NRG Energy. NRG is the largest competitive retailer in the country to residential consumers. We don't do any door-to-door marketing of our energy products in Maryland. And we do a lot of digital marketing. We are present in box stores, but door-to-door is not something we do at all. And I have to respectfully disagree with my former colleague as a regulator, Chair Hoover. I really do think this bill would push out a number of the Fortune 500 companies, the good actors in the marketplace. The one thing the bill doesn't do, you've heard a lot about it, is ban door-to-door marketing. I think a lot of those people would stay in the market because they've already proven themselves willing to disobey the law and flout the law. But I've talked to our business leadership, and I think this bill would render Maryland largely uninvestable. And it would do so by doing really a couple of things. First, it would prohibit with a blanket prohibition a number of our most popular products. And then it has a number of provisions that just make doing business very difficult. You've heard about the ban on green products. Right now, SOS is matched to a little more than a third of its supply to RECs. RECs are the law of the land. It's what Maryland uses in its own state law to demonstrate compliance with renewable energy. I live in Prince George's County, and I'm a purchaser of a 100% green product that comes at a 1 cent premium over SOS. My choice to do that would be outlawed. No one is fleecing me. I'm not being overcharged, but this bill would prevent me from entering into that contract with a supplier of my choice. Second, the ban on contracts longer than 12 months. That provides customers rate certainty in a market that does change. The SOS rate changes 3 times a year, and it is quite volatile at times. And finally, the historic trailing average, that would actually prevent people from signing up with products that could save them money right now off the SOS price. So there's plenty of products out there that could save people money, but tying it to a historical trailing average actually prohibits people from signing up to those contracts. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Crosby. I'm Jennifer Spinosi. I'm the General Counsel and EVP of Corporate Affairs for Clean Choice Energy. Clean Choice is a mission-driven company, and our mission is to transform the electricity market by making it easy for residential customers to switch to clean, renewable energy. We've been doing business in Maryland for more than 10 years. Our founder and CEO is a Bethesda resident. And similar to some others, we don't use high pressure sales tactics. We don't do any door-to-door in Maryland. We don't do any telesales in Maryland. A majority of our customers have enrolled in response to a direct mail packet or by going onto our website. We do charge a premium price and we're transparent about that. We don't start with a low teaser rate and then increase it over time. Even from the point of enrollment, our price is going to be higher than utility default service. We disclose that to customers and we never charge an early termination fee if they want to cancel. Just this summer, Clean Choice is exceptionally proud to have secured more than a $100 million capital investment to develop, acquire, own and operate our own solar facilities in the Mid-Atlantic. We just broke ground on the first project in Pennsylvania. It's about 50 miles across the border of Maryland. That's a 20 megawatt project. And once it's operational later this year, we do expect that the RECs generated from that project would be used to serve some of our Maryland customers. That vision and the reason that we're making that capital investment is so that we can become vertically integrated to operate solar facilities that are located in the same region and for the benefit of our retail customers. I share Mr. Kavula's concern, and Vice Chair, I know that this is a point on which we disagree, but I do think that this bill as written would effectively end the retail market in Maryland, including prohibiting customers from choosing a renewable product. Thank you for your time. I urge an unfavorable report.
Thank you, Vice Chair. It's the business person in me that it's like I feel like I'm at the doctor's office and they take that hammer and sort of hit you on the knee and not expect me to kick the doctor back, right? So the bill is problematic in its premise. It's expecting us to look at this and be willing to accept the possibility that we will end this marketplace. And I guess my question goes to when you were listening to the chairman of the PSC talking, and this is the regulator, and this is the one who's saying that we have conversations with retail energy company, that we receive the complaints. I have to assume that the industry is going to say that not only are we in the room because the chairman's saying that you are, but you're probably also the actors that are saying, well, here are our ideas, here's the market's thoughts, and I have to assume, without even having talked to you about this, that engagement occurs. Am I correct?
Yeah, on our part, absolutely, Delegate. It does occur. We have an active process of participating in the regulatory process. We're always asking for meetings with the commission to exchange information and ideas. As Ms. Spinosi said, and Ms. Smith said, there's an active regulatory proceeding right now that could take up a number of ideas out of this piece of legislation. Candidly, it hasn't seen the action that we would like it to. And some of the programs that you have already adopted in statute have not been implemented by the commission. We share the commission's concern about their resourcing. We share their concern about licensing provisions. And, I know the identities of some of the people who were being talked about unauthorized enrollment and slamming. And it's unfortunate that they're not here in the room today, nor do they participate in the regulatory process until the regulator calls them to the bench and actually threatens the revocation of their license. So if anything, we're more than supportive. We would be happy to help furnish the regulator more resources to take on those enforcement cases.
And may I just add quickly, sure. There's also the Consumer Affairs Division process, which is laid out in COMAR. So as Mr. Kavula said, in addition to being at the table, the companies to create more violations in regulation, just like there exists in the enforcement authority for the Commission against Utilities, Community Solar, other sectors. It's also, to enforce the laws and regulations that are on the books. And that's why that process exists. And a lot of the cases that were discussed today, like returning everyone to SOS, that's because there was an enforcement taken. The license was revoked.
Right. So I mean, my follow-up to that is when I hear the chairman say that the industry really needs to start cleaning itself up. Well, the way to do that is to do what you've just said. You participate with the regulator and you become a voice that helps say X, Y, Z and expect the commission to do a thing. Now, the commission may say, I don't have the resources, or I don't have the proper tools, or maybe the guardrails need to be changed. But the answer from the regulator can't be, hey, I just need to stop regulating vis-a-vis or through the lens of the industry just needs to go away, because they may not be saying that, but the bill implies that. And I don't think we can ignore the reality as we're sitting in this room today, that a bill passing without really seriously thinking about what the commission just said, are they serious about it? Are they serious about having the industry at the table, listening, but also reacting? Or is it, we're going to stand back and we're just going to say, we can't do it? I can't believe the state of Maryland is going to say, or listen to the commission say, we just can't do it. And that's, I'll leave it there and would ask if you want to add to that, because it's important that I believe we respond to what I've heard, okay, from the chairman in a way that you're already doing this, right?
Delegate, there's a lot to agree with in what Chairman Hoover said, actually. Sure. And I think there is a conceivable set of amendments to this legislation that actually try to triangulate where we are and where he is in order to improve the regulatory process. But that doesn't look like the 28 pages of this bill. It might look like about half of this bill that would effectively then keep open the retail market while enhancing enforcement. But you know, there is no, as a former regulator myself, you know, there is no way of avoiding regulating this industry. And the industry's been characterized as the Wild West, but you know, NRG does not have the power to discipline another market actor. I mean, I asked Mr. Yeasel, testifying in favor of the bill, about an experience he had, the talented energy attorney who I know from my social life. And I was like, who is that guy? And he told me. And but it's not as if I can go find that actor and beat him up. That's not the kind of Wild West we live in here. So, you know, it sounds like appropriate action is being taken against that actor. I look forward to them being kicked out of the market because it's people like that, fly-by-nights, who God knows where they're domiciled at, that are threatening the industry for all of us, people who just want to conduct an ethical business.
I just want to say, when he says Wild Wild West, he doesn't mean vigilante justice as far as like lawlessness. Like generally no rules. We're not trying to get you guys to go beat anybody up. It really has more to do with no laws, the Wild Wild West. There's there's just horse thieves everywhere. So yeah, he does not mean vigilante justice. Just to let you know. Steve.
Thank you. I think I saw you wink. I'm sorry. Sorry. I guess when I listen to your testimony, you guys are the losers in this bill. Is that right?
That would be one way to describe it, I think.
Yeah. Every time you have a loser, you have a winner. Who do you think the winner is?
I mean, if you want to take a swing at that, Ms. Spinozzi, I've been talking too much, perhaps, but I can venture a guess as well.
No, I'll defer to you.
Okay, well, you know, I will. I heard the characterization that this was not a debate between utility monopolies and competitive suppliers, but in reality it is, because the long-term strategic vision of the regulated monopoly community has been to remonopolize this market ever since it was demonopolized. And the effective result of this bill would be to do just that. The utilities do make a margin on standard offer service. Ironically, if the bill's provisions about price caps on tied to SOS and extending to renewable products were applied to the utilities, it would outlaw the co-op product, the co-op green product that we heard about before. But it doesn't apply to it. It only applies to us. So there is an inequity here. And it is sort of about whether or not you want to return to a monopoly with possibly a community choice aggregation in the midst of it, or whether you want a more diverse competitive supply landscape in the state of Maryland.
I think
I'll chime in on one bit further. I let Mr. Kavula take the hard part of that answer. I do think there's one thing that real members and a number of retail suppliers do agree with advocates on, and that is that customers need to be better informed. a customer who understands the basics of this market, the difference between a fixed price and a variable price, the term of their contract, is going to make a better choice for them. And, you know, I hate to come to Maryland and talk too much about Pennsylvania, but your neighbors to the north, just this past week, won several public relations and media campaigns for their equivalent of Maryland's shopping website. It gets more than 1 million visitors per year, a state-sponsored website that is focused on making sure customers understand their right to choose, understand some of the complexities of this industry, and are truly empowered to make a choice that's right for them. And I think, you know, in terms of pricing transparency, in terms of the renewable component of that, Clean Choice has a whole section on its website that talks about how clean energy works, that talks about RECs, that talks about the fact that you're not having a different plug that, you know, is going into your house. That same disclosure is included in all of our contract materials. It's very important. It's disheartening to me to hear that customers feel misled by a product that they don't understand. So that customer education is fundamentally important to the success of this market.
Yeah, I was actually, I'm glad you brought it up, but I was going to mention Pennsylvania because I relate there. I'm from there, and I've actually been speaking to people about that. They have a very complex, I mean, it looks like they drive that way. But I guess in fairness, one of the biggest things we need to be concerned with, I think, in this committee is that we need to give the best product to our ratepayers, and we need to give the least expensive product to our ratepayers. And by eliminating competition, we're going to actually increase those rates, in my opinion. Isn't that so?
I would agree with that statement,
Thank
sir.
you.
Statements. Just a little bit confused. You talked about educating the public, and yet when you heard from Smecco come up here about marketing SOS, a lot of that was to educate their customers that SOS is significantly cheaper than your product. And for Clean Choice, I'm not really sure when we start talking about a competitive market, I fail to understand how SOS is 8.7 cents and you're 18.93 last year. Can you tell me what about that is competitive? I mean, why would anybody in their right mind choose you?
Well, that's an average price, so I don't know that
Okay.
it's indicative of.
So what you're basically saying to me right now is somebody's paying 40 cents, so I can have two people pay less than the SOS. Is that really what you're telling me?
Our product is not intended to compete on price with SOS, and we're very transparent about that. I'm not the biggest company in the market like NRG.
So now
We're
you're
a very small player.
okay. So
The product is
coming
not
back
right
to
for
NRG.
everyone.
Coming
I'm
back to
certainly not
NRG.
here to say that.
So, sir, one thing about door to door, because I think that there are probably 23 votes to ban door to door, to be honest with you. And I hear this a lot. The problem with that, and the reason I stripped it out, has to do with the fact that that would be a restriction of speech. We can't do that. So that is why door to door is not in the bill, nor will it make it to the bill in its final outcome. Last, for NRG, I'm just kind of curious. You made a claim that this bans green energy. Can you point to me where in the bill that it does that?
So, Delegate, I mean, it prohibits all products that are priced higher than the 12-month historic average of utility SOS pricing.
But you could still go out and you could buy 100% wind for the wind that we're about to sell off the Eastern Shore. You could go out and get community solar. You can still buy into other green products. It's just, frankly, you can't buy into a REC that you probably purchased from outside the PJM. Let me stop there. Do you get your RECs from inside or outside the PJM?
I'm on a supply product that sources them from PJM and from states that are.
Where does NRG get most of their RECs? I guess that is my question.
Yeah, NRG sources RECs nationwide. Our corporate philosophy is that our consumers care more about the carbon emissions associated with, which is, the atmosphere is a global commons, right? It doesn't matter where the carbon is emitted. It all makes it into the atmosphere and contributes to global warming. And so our products are focused on obtaining RECs from all sources across the United States.
Basically what you're saying is you're going to dilute the power purchase of a REC, and you want Marylanders, as a Texas company, you want Marylanders to subsidize out-of-state ratepayers. And I'm saying when this is done, you're going to be on an even playing field because you talk all about competition until the rules are fair, and then you don't like that. But we're going to put you into the PJM just like our utilities, and you can then go compete and purchase RECs from inside the PJM, which, as we heard from the PSC, will drive up the price of the REC inside our grid system and ultimately lead to more green investment inside the PJM.
So Delegate, I've now heard you say two things. I've heard you say you're going to restrict the purchases of RECs to PJM, which will be more expensive. And then your bill provides for a price cap tied to the historic trailing average of SOS price that only includes 1/3 PJM supplied RECs.
Right.
So you're imposing, with respect, you're imposing a restriction which you yourself acknowledge is a catch-22.
No, it's not a catch-22.
Which will effectively lead to the closure of this market for these 100% clean energy products.
Well, I guess I'm getting in trouble here by the chair, but I honestly, I disagree. I think that ultimately it's going to be truth in advertisement. And yes, we're going to make the investments here in Maryland, and you're going to have to figure out a way to compete on that, because right now the utilities are doing it through SOS, and SMECO does it. And frankly, their SOS is a straight pass through. They don't make anything. And they smoke Clean Choice, who's sitting right next to you, by less than half. On some of yours, I mean, your best producer that I can find on average, granted, it's on average, is Zoom, which is 14.53. But you go all the way up to one of them is almost three times SOS. So, with all due respect, I disagree with you, and I have no further questions.
I didn't think that was a question, but you guys did see Nerd Rage in action. He's obviously very intent on what he deals with here, and I think we're getting ready to get a little more of that. Delegate Charcuti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I'm going to not ask a question, but make a comment, which is that it's interesting. No, I'll ask a question. I'm actually interested if each of you could say what your position was, or the companies that you represent, when Community Choice Energy was in front of this committee. What was your position on that bill? I believe each and every one of you was opposed. Do you want to tell me that was different from that? NRG fought it hard. AOBA opposed it, eventually changed their mind, but I'm not worried about AOBA here. RESA definitely fought it hard. REAL didn't exist yet. Is that right? Okay. But most of your companies opposed it. And the reason that I'm highlighting that is because for folks who weren't here at the time that Community Choice Energy was in front of us, Community Choice Energy allows for competition and allows every single one of you to bid in, but you have to negotiate with a county who is negotiating on behalf of 1 million customers, or a municipality who is negotiating on behalf of 20,000 customers. And my understanding of the opposition was that the business model is one person at a time, or in some cases, one company at a time. And what you were fought, unbelievable how hard folks fought against Community Choice Energy, and eventually got it down to just a pilot for Montgomery County. And we'll see what happens, because folks have continued to fight in the regulatory scene. But what it highlighted for me is this question about how much you really want competition and a fair playing field. How much, when you're engaging with an entity that can really negotiate with you, that's actually what you're looking for, as opposed to the ability to sort of, in some cases, manipulate or get an individual to make a purchase without the power behind them of the negotiating that an entire county can do. So you don't need to speak to that, because you answered my question, which is all of you except AOBA fought it hard. The second question that I do want to ask is, this is to NRG. You own generation?
Yeah, we do.
And does your generation that you own, do you bid it into SOS auctions in Maryland and in other states that have SOS?
I don't know when the last time we've offered into SOS Maryland is, but we do offer into other default auctions. We also supply municipal aggregations. We're the supplier to the Community Choice Program in Boston.
The direct energy, through direct energy.
That's right, and a
Yeah.
number of other community
Yeah.
choice. So ask us again in a
well,
year or so, our position on community
It's
choice.
interesting because
That'll be
direct energy supported community choice energy until NRG bought them. And then the next year they had to come in against it. It was funny. It was,
Well, and
it was an interesting.
And I'm happy delegate to explain our position
That-
there. I mean,
That's okay. You
Okay.
explained
There
it in
wasn't a
those
question
terms.
posed yet.
Let me.
There will be. No, I mean, I don't want him, he didn't have to explain something that wasn't.
Right.
I know
That's-
you're
right.
getting to it. I wasn't trying to
Yes.
interrupt you. I just want to make sure,
Yeah, got it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just I want to clarify this idea of monopoly generation, monopoly utilities, because I think that there's this misunderstanding when we talk about the deregulation. And in fact, when we talk about the price impacts of deregulation and prices going down in states that were deregulated, the state is still deregulated. And even if we were to get rid of retail choice, even if we were to get rid of it completely, this is still a deregulated market where utilities don't own generation. Generation is competitive. Generation is built competitively. Generation is owned competitively. And the competition is in SOS, right? SOS is a competitive process. And so I just want to be really careful when we talk about it's the end of competition or it's back to monopoly. It's back to monopoly regulated utilities, because whether or not this bill is going to get rid of retail choice in the state, I don't know. There's clearly a disagreement about that. But even if it did, we are not re-regulating generation, because just by definition, we have competition through SOS. Do you agree with that?
No, I actually don't agree, Delegate Charkoudian, because I think competition is not really present when you have a single buyer in the system, and which can define the structure of the purchases that are made in view of a number of different suppliers. That's the same, that's how Southern Company in Georgia works. They have other suppliers as well, but they possess a retail monopoly on the supply of electricity in a given service territory. That's what this bill threatens to return the state of Maryland to. And that similarity between, in this case, Georgia and what Maryland would become is actually more similar than the similarities, say, between Maryland and Pennsylvania. So I disagree with you, and I don't think the economics supports you on your position.
If you didn't have a highly regulated auction, I would say that that's true. If you have one buyer, Walmart or Amazon become big enough and they can sort of control the folks who are supplying them. But in this case, it's a highly regulated market. It's a highly regulated auction. And so by definition, what the auction regulators are looking for is to make sure that it is a fair process that ensures competition, that ensures that we get the lowest possible price for SOS. So I think you'd be right if it were Pepco off buying on their own and able to control how the buying went. But because of the structure that we have, I think that we continue to have competition in generation. I have one last question.
If I may.
I have one last question. And that's related to Rex. I want to, in some ways, the vice chair asked the question, but I was not totally clear if each of you could talk about what percentage of your RECs are currently coming from PJM. Because I know you said you're building a solar field somewhere near here. That'd be in PJM, right? But the rest of your RECs, where are they coming from for the most part? I actually did go to your website, by the way. I tried to find the explanation of RECs. I didn't find it. I also couldn't figure out where the energy was coming from. So if you just would talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Thank you for the question. On an annual basis, Clean Choice updates the disclosures that are in its contract materials. So we haven't updated for 2023 yet, but in 2022, the RECs for our Maryland customers were 60% wind, 40% solar, and those RECs were procured from Maryland, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Illinois, and Indiana.
And do you know which percentage from which place?
Not today.
Okay, maybe you could follow up.
Certainly, A majority of our recs are from within PJM. I would venture to say that some of those Illinois wind recs are from MISO. There are a handful of solar facilities in Virginia that we procure from that are not PJM.
So I guess I'm wondering
PJM or a state adjacent.
that part of the
Yes.
bill, then you wouldn't have a problem with. I understand there's a lot of other things you have a problem with them, but that part you wouldn't have a problem with that.
Clean Choice, in fact, submitted an amendment to Delegate Stein's bill last year that would have supported recs, voluntary recs being procured from within PJM or an adjacent state.
So the same rules as the SOSS. Okay. And how about NRG? Where there's a,
Yeah, like I said in response to the vice chair's question, we procure our recs nationally. I don't have a
but
breakdown.
to percentages, you don't know.
I don't, and you know, like I said, I kind of have a difference of opinion with Ms. Spinozzi on this because I think primarily customers care about carbon emissions and not necessarily the locality of the project. But listen, that provision of the bill does not crack the top half dozen concerns that we have with it.
And I just, but you potentially are procuring recs from places in the country where the renewables would be built, whether or not there was a rec market. Is that right?
I don't think
like
that's...
Texas, we know for a whole host of reasons, there's renewables that get built in Texas and were built before there were rec markets and continue to pencil. I mean, there's negative, I mean, they have negative energy prices at some point because there's
If I may, so Delegate Charkoudian, I mean, if that were true, then the economic theory behind it would suggest that the recs would be priced at zero, and they're not. So until you actually see rec pricing at zero, which suggests that no incremental revenue is necessary for the renewable project to be constructed and to continue operation, then I would say that postulation is not accurate as a matter of financial and economic theory.
Well, I think that the fact that an owner can bid their energy into the Texas grid at a lower price because they can take recs from Maryland, from Marylanders allows, I mean, there's a lot of different markets that you have going on. And so they can bid into Texas at a much lower price because Maryland is subsidizing them. So the ratepayers in Texas benefit from that. Because we have Marylanders who think that they're doing something for clean energy when that wind would be built, but it would be sold into the Texas market at a higher price. You know what? Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, that's what y'all get for opposing the vice chair's bill, I guess, but thank you guys very much. I know you guys withstood a lot of slings and arrows tossed at you. Hopefully that we will find a way, as I've said before, it's not really the goal of this policymaking body to come to middle ground, but to hear all sides and then to the best of our ability, make a decision. So I can't promise anybody will be happy, but I can promise that you've been heard. So thank you guys very much. I believe we have one more unfavorable with Vistra, Christina Montgomery. One more in person. So ma'am, this is your time to shine by yourself. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Happened and across the street too, last but not least. Well, good afternoon, Chair Wilson, Vice Chair Crosby, members of the committee. My name is Christina Montgomery. I'm Director of Regulatory Policy for Vistra, and I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. We applaud the sponsor's commitment to consumer protection, but we cannot, unfortunately, support the legislation as drafted. We believe that well-functioning competitive markets designed with appropriate consumer protections provide the best outcomes and value for consumers. We also believe that companies need to be transparent and honest in their offerings. One of our core principles is that we do business the right way, and we strongly support any efforts to increase consumer protection. We agree that there are provisions in this legislation that would provide additional oversight. However, we remain concerned that when all of the bill's provisions are taken together, they impose significant changes to the market that may impair continued investment in the state. Instead of restricting consumer options, Vistra encourages stakeholders to work together to find ways to ensure appropriate oversight, increase transparency on products, terms, and conditions, and strict consequences for suppliers not doing business the right way. Unfortunately, this bill does more to reduce choice than to promote informed choice. And for that reason, we cannot support the legislation as drafted, but we do remain committed to working with all stakeholders to improve the retail market for all Marylanders. And we request an unfavorable report. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Seeing no questions, we appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
There's one. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, this is the late hour, and I think we've vetted most of this. Would you like to comment at all on, like, we had the chairman of the PSC in, which I embraced so much of his testimony, but I also think that the regulator was, you know, and the chairman actually brought this up, so I'll just say it. You know, the Wild Wild West component wasn't necessarily the one where we're expecting the market to go and self-regulate, right? I mean, but I think that the chairman was saying in some ways that, hey, the market needs to clean itself up, but that's your role is to participate with the PSC. Would you agree with that? I mean, I should start there.
Absolutely. And I do chair the Retail Energy Supply Association's Maryland Electric Group. I've served in that role for almost 5 years now. And that is a key of what we do, is to engage with the commission, both formally and informally, to help improve the retail markets.
And the reason why I bring it up is because I think our chairman came in sort of at the end and was listening to NRG talking about this. It really was because in the response to the PSC chairman saying that, hey, we need the market to, you know, get this straight, clean this up. And I'm like, well, you know, my point was that's not the role of the market. The role of the market is to be regulated, comply with regulations. And then frankly, when they're saying that you're at the table and that was their testimony, that's the place for market. And I want to just establish that. I think it's an important designation that we raise. The other question that I have for you is you're multi-state, and let's just say this doesn't necessarily knock you out of Maryland. Let's just say that it's not the bill's intent and that somehow or another you're able to figure this out. Are you worried that the competition ultimately goes away and that we actually as a state will make energy more expensive and give people less choice? I mean, because I think that through what I was hearing from my colleague across the way, that was a very lengthy way of going around the same question. Mine's a very simple one. Free markets are normally the best path to you know, keeping prices competitive and giving consumers choice. And I would assume that at some point you have some perspective, both in this state, but perhaps others, that would add to or take away from what I'm saying.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I mean, you know, as I think we've all discussed, competition does work to lower prices, and that's what the data and the evidence shows us. But competition works because of the retail suppliers in this room participating in the market. And while we can't say definitively what will happen, we are hearing consistent concerns that if this bill goes into place as is, it may discourage continued involvement in the Maryland market. And so that does have the ability to impact pricing, to decrease competition. And that would impact all Marylanders, both those shopping and not shopping.
All right, it's a late hour, so I'll stop asking there. Thanks.
Again, ma'am, thank you very much for your testimony. I see no further questions. The first virtual one. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is John Hanger. I'm a former Pennsylvania Public Utility Commissioner and a former Secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection, as well as a former legal services attorney and public advocate in the city of Philadelphia. My family is heavily located in the Westminster, Maryland area, where my 92-year-old mother lives, my sister, nieces, and nephews. I'm here because I respectfully ask for a negative vote or unfavorable recommendation on this bill. I do so because I read it as written, and I'm relieved to hear that amendments are coming, because this bill must be amended very, very heavily if it were not to, in fact, close the market in Maryland. I'm relieved to hear that commercial and industrial customers will be removed. I heard a vague reference to the need to make sure long-term contracts are available. This bill would kill long-term contracts, at least right now. I have to agree with Travis Kavula that the price cap would kill just about every green energy offer, at least offers that 100% green energy in the state. I would agree that a REC purchased anywhere in the United States, or indeed, frankly, in the world, helps fight climate. But I do understand the economic development concerns about having Maryland money in the PJM market, and I would not be opposed to that provision. Retail competition works. In Philadelphia market, customers are paying 1996 prices for generation. 1996 prices for generation. Be careful what you do to this market, because you could end up really doing a lot of damage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Next.
Hi, I think there may be a bit of confusion. So I'm on an information only panel, I believe.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just checking. Sure. So I'm Jenya Conlang. I'm an energy economist, a postdoc at Stanford University, and a fellow at Resources for the Future. RFF is an independent nonprofit research institution that improves environmental energy and natural resource decisions through impartial economic research and policy engagement. Views I express here are my own and may differ from other RFF experts, its officers, or its directors. RFF does not take positions on specific legislative proposals, so I neither support nor oppose this bill. I'm here to answer relevant questions based on my research. So as a brief summary, my academic dissertation research analyzes Baltimore Gas and Electric and commission data on the residential electricity market. I find that households in low-income Baltimore neighborhoods consistently pay higher prices than households in high-income neighborhoods, and the primary cause is more direct marketing in low-income areas. I show evidence that customers who signed up for choice through door-to-door marketing paid higher prices than customers who compared offers on MD Electric Choice. I also show evidence that prices tend to increase on contract renewal because many customers are inattentive. At the same time, I find evidence that some households value choice and are willing to pay a premium for value-added products. My paper does not make any policy recommendations, but I analyze policy counterfactuals and trade-offs. For example, a single binding price cap would protect many inattentive and uninformed households from high prices. It may also discourage some innovative and value-added products. I estimate that a typical supplier's marginal cost is often below, but sometimes above the standard offer service price. And as a final example, I estimate that eliminating direct marketing would decrease average prices and save about $2 million in the Baltimore region.
Thank you very much for all of your research and your testimony, ma'am.
Thank you.
I don't see any questions, so thank you very much. All right, colleagues, thank you for your attentiveness. I believe that concludes this and all bill hearings. We do have an event today at 6 o'clock. So I look forward to seeing everyone.